Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope everyone is well, and I hope everyone's looking forward to today's session on science and Islam, or evolution in Islam. And it's going to be as interactive as usual, where we will be taking many questions and just seeing where this session goes. So if you have any type of question or any kind of doubts, this is the place to ask those questions, inshallah. So I'm just going to be sending out a few reminders to our parents to log in. And as we normally do, we wait for the first 5 or so minutes just to allow people to come in and get ready, inshallah. And I do hope that, if people do have questions, do ask them as well. And we want new people to ask questions as well, alongside our regular viewers as well, who we are grateful to as well. So inshallah, if you like to ask questions, start putting them down. When Professor rejoins us, then we will start in about 5 minutes, inshallah. So yeah, that's that. So I'm just going to send out some reminders to parents to join us, inshallah. Wa alaikum assalam, Philosopher MMA. Wa alaikum assalam, Salam Mesti. Wa alaikum assalam, Juwaria. Wa alaikum assalam, Hussein. That's good. You've got a question. So Hussein, do type up the question, and we can do that. And Zakaria as well, and the Philosopher MMA. Okay, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Okay, so as we are still continuing our session on, so actually this is our 6th session, I believe, on evolution and Islam. Professor's rejoined us again. He went to get some water as well. So how was the glass of water, Dr. Shoaib?
Yeah, it's nice and wet, Sheikh. It's filling my thirst, Sheikh.
MashaAllah. So Jazakallah for coming back to us. So as I was mentioning, we're going to wait for a couple more minutes for people to join us, inshallah, and then we will start. Those of you who are already online with us, you can start formulating your questions, putting them up, and we will take it from there. And I think, Dr. Shoaib, today you wanted to also talk a bit more about some discussions that you were having outside of this session with some people, and you wanted to clarify some things as well. Is that right, Dr. Shoaib?
Yeah, I mean, inshallah, we'll have fun with today's session, inshallah, and yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and as I did mention in the YouTube questions section or comment section, that have your questions ready, as the professor wants challenging questions today. And I assumed that because today was the first day that Dr. Shoaib mentioned to me that there's no time limit today. So Dr. Shoaib is ready to go on and on and on. Am I right in believing that, Dr. Shoaib?
Inshallah, inshallah,
Okay,
Sheikh.
fantastic. That's great stuff, mashallah. Okay, so so Philosopher MMA, I'm just going to bring your question up. Does Dr. Shoaib have any website where we can read his articles, if any?
So most of my articles, there's something equivalent of a Facebook for academics, and it's called Academia, academia.edu, right? There's an alternative website called ResearchGate, and what this is basically considered like as an online profile where academics post their publications for people to read, right? And it's not hidden behind a paywall. There's no like registration fees. You can just log in, and you can get access to the article straight away. So that's where generally I post most of my stuff. I have a lot of stuff that's already been published and accepted. It's just that getting from acceptance to publication, as in like ready for distribution, takes a long time in academia. So I have, for example, submitted 2 articles since last year. They're still under development and possibly may come out at the end of this year. So unfortunately, the whole process takes ages.
What I have done, Dr. Shoaib, whilst you were talking, is I found your academia page, and I'm just going to put it up on the comment section for those of you who are on YouTube and Facebook. So what you can do, you can join academia as well, and you can. You're more than welcome to follow Dr. Shoaib, and you've got quite a lot of articles there that you've written, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, like, they're okay. They're not like exhaustive or anything. But I will recommend just holding out until I get a few more. Right now, I have, I think, an article on just a monograph on atheism, 2 short articles on Islam and evolution, a few on one on atheism. But there's several more that are in the pipeline. It's just taking a while for them to come out.
Brilliant. Okay, excellent. So that's great as well. Alhamdulillah. So I think wa alaikum salam, Zahra, nice to have you with us. Okay, so I think we've given our first 5 to 6 minutes for people to join, and I think it's time for us to start. Just before we carry on, if you do want to read some of Professor's ideas and just to basically get a taste of what he's written, I have put the link to his academia page. But as Dr. Shoaib said, don't worry. I mean, there's a lot more that he's done or he's doing. But if you want to get a taste of it, am I right to say that that's the page to kind of visit? You can also follow or become Dr. Shoaib's friend on Facebook, or you can follow or like the FESP page as well. And do subscribe to the FESP page YouTube channel. From next week, inshallah, this will also be on the FESP page YouTube and also on the FEP page as well. So the reason why we're going to do it on both, because there's different types of viewers coming from both. So from FEP, we're aiming at our students, our parents. But on FESP, I think it's more broader, those who are interested in these topics worldwide. So I think it'll be good to have both on board as well. And it will be very beneficial for our students to get to listen to some of the ideas that are coming from people who are interested in this. Yes, Dr. Shoaib, you smiled at something. Did I miss something
I was just signaling something to my wife because she wanted something from me.
Okay. Right. Okay. Right. So let's move on, inshallah. We have Ustada Shazia with us, one of our teachers as well. Okay. So I think let's begin, Sheikh. Let's begin. So we have Hussein here. Hussein is saying, is there a difference between science and miracles? Sheikh Uthman Ali says that there are such things as science miracles or scientific miracles, but Allah made them happen. Can you elaborate on this, Professor? So you might want to kind of, I mean, have you understood what Hussein is trying to say, or?
Right. I'm assuming here that Hussein is asking if there's a conflict between science and miracles. The qualification is that Allah permits, miracles to happen. And he wants me to elaborate on that. Do you think that's a correct interpretation of that question?
I think so. And okay. If not, then Hussein can come back to us. But yeah, if you continue responding to that, Sheikh, that'd be great.
Right. So in my personal opinion, you have to bear in mind, right, that we don't believe in the kind of God that created the universe and then left it to its own devices. We believe God is sustaining us even right now, every single moment, every single second. Okay, so he's completely immediate all the time, everywhere. And if he so willed, he could even cause us to not exist in a momentary's lapse, if he willed. By the same token, if he willed, for the next moment, I could literally have something come into my hand as a miracle, if he willed it, right? Now, the key thing here is that science works on a primary presumption, which is the idea that regularity must hold in time and in space. What do I mean by that? So if we believe that if we drop something, like if I have my mug here and I drop it, it's going to go down. And I know from past experiences, it's always going to go down. From those past experiences, those observations, I can derive a law that when I drop something, it goes down. And then you can, come up with the law of gravity. And we believe that these laws are not just local to us, they're applicable everywhere. So if I'm dropping a cup or you're dropping a cup, or people are dropping cups in Mauritius, all of them are going to have the same effect, right? So regularity is a presumption of science. Without regularity, science cannot get off the ground. It's a presumption of science. Now, what is sustaining those regularities? It's God. So each moment in of itself is an activity of God. Now, what God does is sometimes he wants to kind of establish that he's in total control. So he establishes or performs miracles, which simply means that he is acting contrary to what we usually observe. So for instance, we don't naturally see wooden sticks being converted into snakes. We don't naturally see seas floating and splitting apart. We don't naturally see people going into fire and not getting burnt, right? All of these are miraculous, at least according to our understanding of the natural world. But God is not bound by the laws that he has instilled in the natural world. He is beyond them. That means he can automatically, whenever he so wishes, change what he wants to manifest in nature at any moment in time. So I hope that clarifies what we mean by science and miracles. Now, to specifically make sure that this is clear, Muslims don't have a problem with science whatsoever, right? But we believe that science, in order for it to even get off the ground, it needs to have that regularity that I'm emphasizing on. The moment that regularity is gone, you can no longer do science. So as you go, if something is changing so rapidly from one moment to another, science cannot be applied to it anymore because the idea of regularity is lost. So I hope that makes sense, that the idea here is that, yes, God has instilled laws of nature in this universe. We can use science to understand those laws. However, God is completely free to be able to change those laws as he so wishes.
Yeah. And there's something that, Jazakallah for that. I think that's, you clarified it very well. Someone called Jazib Kalim has a point that they wanted to add, and I thought I'll just bring it on. Miracles are simply the suspension of laws of science. Science and miracles don't go hand in hand. Yeah. And and Jazib is also mentioning here, miracles are suspensions of the laws of science because God wants to show his work. Science and miracles don't naturally go hand in hand. God is way above science because it's his creation.
Exactly.
Cool. Brilliant. So there was something that so there was something that was I was interested by, and that was the philosopher MMA's question, which is a slightly different topic, but I think it's an interesting one. And I want to add a few points to that, Sheikh, if that's okay, and then you can answer. So the philosopher MMA is asking, what is Dr. Shoaib's opinion on pantheism, not pantheism? Many Muslim Sufis and scholars have adopted this position, including Ibn Arabi and Rumi. So, and this is something I remember at university as well. When I was studying the Abrahamic faiths, we were looking at spirituality. And I remember coming across one of our lecturers, Dr. Ahmed Ashtar. He mentioned how Ibn Arabi, for instance, was of the opinion, to some extent, that, there are many paths to God, including Christianity and Judaism, for instance. But the quickest and the best and the blessed path is the path of Islam. So how would you see that, Sheikh? And what is your take on that? And also, after that, can we move on to Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah, and what he says about this as well? So over to you, Sheikh.
Right.
You asked for challenging questions.
This is nothing to do with Islam and evolution. I just want to clarify that. I want to point that out. This has nothing to do with today's topic. Okay, but I will entertain it. But two, Sheikh, there's a difference between what you're asking and what philosopher MMA is asking. He's not. So
if you can see that in two different, if you can break that down into two.
Sure. So what you're asking, Sheikh, is whether there are multiple paths to God, right? That is known as perennialism. That has nothing to do with either pantheism or pantheism. So perennialism is the position that we can get salvation in the akhirah.
Well, actually, is it possible if you could explain the philosopher MMA's point first about pantheism and then perennialism after that?
There's no relation between the two.
But could you maybe explain the two separately? So maybe starting with the philosopher's point.
Right. Okay. So putting aside Sheikh Hamid's question, then philosopher MMA is asking, what is my opinion on pantheism? So pantheism is simply that God is part of the world, but he's also beyond the world, right? So everything that we see around us, it is part and parcel of God, but God is also beyond that to some extent, right? Now, the problem here is that from a philosophical point of view, this is slightly difficult to address. Well, it's problematic because God, by definition, is somebody that cannot be a part of time or space, right? Because those are things that are tangible, that are moldable, and we believe that God is immutable. If God is a necessary being, that means he does not conform to things like change. Change is not something that is inherent in God. So that is one line of argument that has been used against addressing the connotations of pantheism. And another problem here is, as some critics point out, that pantheism is dangerously close to pantheism, which is this idea that God is nature, God is everything here, right? So again, the same line of argument here is that, well, if God is nature, then does that mean when I'm, just to be very crude here, but I think it drives the point home. So does that mean when I'm, relieving myself, or people are relieving themselves in the bathroom, God is also that? It kind of leads to some very absurd consequences if you have pantheism or pantheism as a worldview. In my opinion, both of them are theologically problematic and philosophically problematic.
And were these the views of Sufis and scholars like Ibn Arabi and Rumi?
Right. So I mean, like, there's a whole debate that I've read about Ibn Arabi. Right. I cannot say anything about Rumi because I don't know about Rumi that much to be able to say this. But I know for a fact that Ibn Arabi, William Chittick, argues quite heavily against this idea that he was a pantheist, that he was, a standard, thinker, or some kind of orthodox thinker. But whether he had pantheistic ideas, that is still being debated over. So I know that scholars have disagreed over this. So whether we have a conclusive opinion, I don't think we have a consensus as of yet, at least as far as my reading goes.
Okay, and moving on to the second point on perennialism.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? I mean, have you read up on Ibn Arabi's views on that? And also, can you talk a bit about Imam Ghazali and what he thought as well?
So for me, Ibn Arabi is a very complex thinker, right? And I haven't given him the time of day to be able to digest his works fruitfully, like I haven't done with many other thinkers. I focused right now. My focus is on a particular thinker and a particular tradition, hopefully to expand beyond that later on. So I cannot actually claim about Ibn Arabi's worldview. But what I can say is that, from a Ghazalian perspective, how would he understand the issue of perennialism? And he basically mentions this in Faisal Tafriqa. This is a book that he wrote, and in there he was I think quite relaxed in terms of his opinion, not too relaxed but relaxed enough. He says that ultimately what makes somebody sincere is their motivation and their intention to seek the truth, and that can happen in anybody's hearts. It can happen in the Christian, the Muslim, the Jew, right? And if they're genuine and sincere, then they will find a path either in this life or the next life. The point is that God will be able to see what kind of decisions they made through their personal journey. But the key thing is their sincerity and motivation on behalf of the individual. Now, he does classify, however, that we need to create...
So is that Imam Ghazali you're referring to?
Yeah, Ghazali, Imam Ghazali,
Okay.
Yeah. So he makes it very clear in his work that there are three kinds of non-believers that we should be wary of, because we cannot just look at every non-Muslim and say he's going to hellfire or whatever. That's a bit of a strong claim, right? And that means you know already that God has decided to put him in hellfire, which you do not. You do not even know whether you're going to hellfire or not. So, how can you make that claim about that individual? Now, we know by principle what's going to happen. We know that, if you pray, God will reward you, etc. But whether he will accept you as an individual, you as your deeds, that is a wholly different question that you don't actually know. What will happen versus what we know is going to happen are two different things, right? We know by principle what we should expect, but what's going to happen, wallahu alam, those decisions lie with God. So he basically says there are three kinds of disbelievers. There's one kind of disbeliever who has never heard of Islam. So that category is possible, that there might be people who have never heard of Islam. For them, they will be judged somehow on the Day of Judgment, right? They will have some kind of their own test. The second category are those people who have heard a very distorted version of Islam. And in our time, this is now most people. Most people have heard of a Fox News version of Islam, a very dumbed down, stupefied version of Islam. So for that reason, when we look at a non-Muslim, we should be very careful in saying, oh, that's a kafir right there. We don't know, right? And then the third kind of disbeliever is somebody who knows the truth of Islam, and only then does he reject it. Only then does he reject it. So a very clear instance of a case of somebody like this is Abu Lahab from the Sirah. He knew that the Prophet was a prophet. He was able to do miracles, and yet he still rejected him, right? So that is the kind of disbeliever that will be going to the hellfire. So he of course, this is just a proposal that he brings forward. Whether you want to accept it or not, that's up to you at the end of the day. But the idea here that I'm trying to say is that he said that everybody must be able to sincerely seek the truth, right? Unfortunately, sometimes even today, in the past, I knew that, I mean, you have stories of, sincere Christians, sincere Jews who are trying to understand, what the truth is out there. And you hear conversion stories all the time, right? But today's day and age, because we're so distracted, I feel, by work, we're by stupid garbage entertainment sometimes, that pondering over and be able to exercise genuine thought becomes very hard nowadays. And I find that, again, I'm sharing my personal experiences, yeah?
Yep.
I find generally that most of the youth, I feel, is not able to even exercise basic sincerity for truth. They're just because they're so preoccupied with garbage entertainment or preoccupation like drugs and whatever have you. This is just my personal observation. God knows best.
Yeah, no, that's Jazakallah for that, Sheikh. But also, just wanted to add that when it comes to Ghazali, that he's kind of focusing on the Abrahamic faiths and people from the What about the karmic faiths? Would you have the same opinion about them?
I mean,
meaning the Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists.
So I don't know whether in Faisal Tafriqa, his audience, or he was restricted just to the Abrahamic religions, right? Because polytheism is a well-known idea. They didn't have to go to India to see it. It was there in Mecca when the Prophet, was preaching and he was giving da'wah. So I don't think polytheism or all these. And bear in mind, Ghazali was in Persia at the time, right? And in Persia, you had Zoroastrianism. That's very similar, right? So there are all these different ideologies that were floating about at the time. So I don't think he would have excluded those. I think that he would have genuinely believed that there are people from different traditions, right? We should all encourage each other to seek the truth, alhamdulillah. And then, and that's it. What else can you do? I don't think that we have to, what we have to be very careful of is avoiding labeling people in a way that removes dialogue, number one, and judging people in a way where you think you've already stepped into God's shoes. That is very important.
Absolutely. Okay, I just wanted to take a different turn now, because we have a student, and he is 8 years old, and he has some questions. And Dr. Shoaib, I don't know if you remember, I was speaking to you about maybe explaining some of these concepts to students as young as 8, and I think it's important that we do start from this age. And I just want to bring up another thing that happened this week. Dr. Shoaib, you're well aware of that video that's gone viral, where a lesson is taking place online on a TV channel in Pakistan, and the students who learnt from their science lesson about the Earth's movements is then shunned by his Islamic studies teacher to say that no, the Earth does not revolve around the sun, and he kind of shuns him and says that no, that's wrong because so and so scholar says it's wrong. So I think it's incredibly important that we do start at a young age, and we do teach science and Islam together, because we then will build confidence in our students to say, yes, actually, there is no clash in that sense. And where there are clashes, there are reasonings behind that, and there are explanations and discussions that are taking place. So coming from Sister Sarah Javed, who I mentioned to you is the Dr. Shoaib of the Fascicle Club at the moment. And she's saying, a question from Cameron, who is 8 years old. He would like to know, how do less developed human beings, like in Stone Age and Ice Age, that he learnt about at school fit in with Adam alayhi salam as the first human being? So, Dr. Shoaib, before you answer that question, I think you may need to maybe explain the different ages that have been there, in terms of science, explain what they were, and then potentially answer Cameron's question. And then, Cameron, you can get back to us whether you've understood or if you have any further questions before we move on to any other question. So,
Right.
Dr. Shoaib, so tell us about the ages, and then could you answer Cameron's question?
Right. Okay. So, with regards to the question, so let's start with some basics, right?
Yeah.
Earth was created around 4.5 billion years ago. So that's 4 and 9 zeros after that. It's a very long time. Just as a point of reference, the universe, so that's entities outside of Earth, the universe all around us, the moons and the planets, that started off 14.5 billion years ago, right? Now, life on Earth, as far as our estimates go, we know that life kind of started about 3.5 billion years ago. And since then, evolution kicked in, and we have now records of dinosaurs and all kinds of biological entities through time. And throughout, the history of the Earth, we have had several kind of seasons or periods over a vast number of millions of years. One of them is known as the Ice Age, right? Now, I don't know exactly how many thousands of years ago, but it was, I think, maybe back 100,000 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And most of the world was covered in ice. That's why it's known as the Ice Age, right? And very, very freezing temperatures. Now, the question that Kamran has asked is Stone Age. We have records of people from the Stone Age and what have you. How does that align with what we understand about Adam alayhi salam? So just bear one thing in mind, right? Now, I'm just telling you how one account is going to go, but it's a completely valid account. And this should be enough, inshallah, to make sense of the whole thing. We know from Quran and Hadith that Adam was born without parents, right? We know that Allah said that he created Adam from, these basic constituents, right? And then he sent Adam down to earth, okay? Now, that is a miracle creation. There is no doubt about that, right? That is a miracle creation. That means he could not be a product of evolution. So it is completely conceivable, however, that there were already humans on earth and Adam was just created miraculously, and that is where our lineage started from, okay? So he doesn't have to necessarily be from the Stone Age. We actually don't know when he existed. He could have existed 100,000 years ago. He could have existed, 200,000 years ago, even 7 million years ago. As far back as we can see that there's some kind of civilizational activity, right? Because one of the basic requirements of Adam is that he was able to think, he had recognition of speech, and he was able to, do things with his hands. Like he had ideas of how to make things, right? So as long as we can find civilization activity that gives us evidence that humans could have existed here, then that gives us a reasonable estimate. We don't have an issue with that. But the key point to draw here is that the Quran is completely silent on whether there were humans before or after Adam's descent to the earth. That's the key point. The creation of Adam is specific and exclusive to him. But the Quran makes no mention of the possibility or the negation that humans could not have existed on earth. So I hope that makes sense. And you can see that it immediately has an alignment, a no-clash alignment with Islam.
I'm trying to speak, I'm trying to get into the shoes of Cameron here, even though they're much smaller than mine. I'm trying to think like Cameron. So Cameron would be thinking, first human, right? Was Adam alayhi salam not the first human? Could you maybe, go deeper into that? That, we've heard from mosques and we've heard from school that Adam alayhi salam is the first human being on earth. How would you respond to that to an 8-year-old?
Right. So I want to first thank Noor, who's watching the show. Noor is I would consider a really good friend, family friend, and she's also part of Fatima Elizabeth. And she just corrected me. She's an astronomer, so I would expect her to correct me on these things. And she said that the age of the universe is not 14.5 billion years, it's 13.7. So I know
Wow.
that seems like a very minutiae point, but I can understand the pedanticness given that this is her field. So thank you, Noor, for correcting me on that. I have no problem being corrected. So if there's anything that I said wrong, please feel free to
Can
say
I
that.
ask where Ustada Noor corrected you, Sheikh? Because I can't see it on the comments.
Yeah. So she's texting me on WhatsApp, and then she just wrote now, "Wow, how do you text and talk?" She's
Okay.
kind of surprised.
Right, Jazakallah for that, Sister Noor. Sister Noor also joined us on camping once, and she was pointing out all the planets and the stars for us. So maybe you can come, Sister Noor can come on YouTube and ask further questions as well, and maybe enlighten us more. That'd be great.
Without a doubt, if you guys want to know about astronomy, I mean, she's the smartest person I know in this territory. Definitely look her up, and she's going to be a very, very big scientist in the future, inshallah. So now, so Sheikh Hamid, coming back to your question, you were saying that how do I point out
So
the fact that
I'm trying to get into the shoes of Kamran, who's 8, and he's obviously, probably had Islamic studies lessons or lessons at school or elsewhere from parents saying Adam alayhi salam was the first prophet, he's the first human being sent on earth, and that's where humanity begins.
Yeah.
So how would you explain to an 8-year-old regarding his concept of first human?
Right. Okay. So if you look at the Quran, right, Adam isn't necessarily depicted as the first of mankind, right? Adam is depicted as the beginning of we are Ibn Adam. We are the sons of Adam, right? But it's very plausible that humanity or humans did exist before him, right? That doesn't seem to conflict with the Quran or Hadith. All we know from the Quran and the Hadith are simply this: that our lineage, our family historical lineage, starts from him. And there could have been easily other humans alongside of us that eventually kind of died out. But he is our starting point in terms of our lineage. That's it. He's not necessarily the start of humanity, even though many people assume that. He's the start of our lineage in this life.
Is there any traditional scholarship on what you're saying available?
Traditional scholarship? Not that I'm aware of, but I know that recently Dr. Solomon Jalajal, he makes this thesis. So he's written a very cool book, guys, that basically says that Adam was the story of Adam in the Quran and Hadith are simply his miraculous creation. But the Quran and Hadith in no shape or form disqualifies the idea that there could have been other human beings on earth prior to his descent. That's the point.
So it's just Dr. Solomon Jalajal. I'm referring to maybe, centuries, scholarships in the past few centuries. Have they ever even thought about this idea? I know that maybe Dr. Solomon Jalajal, he's making this point because we are being impacted and influenced by the evolutionary thought process. And because that wasn't there before, has there ever been this kind of discussion prior to evolution?
No, I think that this idea of creating a disconnection where you treat Adam's creation as an exclusive thing to the start of humanity is a relatively new idea. And it's primarily because of evolution that we've had to look at it this way. Prior to this, I'm not so sure if ulama had the necessity to create this distinction. And I think that's why it will have to be a modern solution or a modern perspective. But I wouldn't be surprised if some ulama that we just don't know about or I don't know about who created this distinction before. Possibly. There could have been a possibility.
Right, okay. And we've just got a ha from Ustada Noor. Salam all, thanks to Dr. Shoaib and Jazakallah. Ustada Noor, if you would like to, jump in at any time, please let us know. We'd be honored to have you here as well. So as Dr. Shoaib
get
mentioned,
her on the show. Get her on the show.
So Sister Noor is an astrophysicist, right?
Yeah.
And so if anyone has any questions regarding astro, for Ustada Noor, then you're more than welcome to ask us, and inshallah she can respond on the comments, or we can actually bring her on board if she's happy to do that. Okay, let's move on, Sheikh. Let's go on to some more questions.
Wait. Sheikh Hamid, Jazib just reminded me, of course, I even looked at Dr. Srar. So now I would say the closest individual who came up with this understanding that there might have been earlier human beings was Dr. Sar Ahmed, who's the famous Pakistani exegete, right?
Yep.
And now to be very precise here, right? He didn't actually say that there were necessarily humans that existed before Adam. He said that there were other bashars before Adam. That's what he was saying, right? Now, what bashar means and what it correlates to in the scientific, because okay, let me make this clear actually. In the Quran, Allah uses two words to refer to human beings. Bashar is one of them, and insan is one of them, right? Either of those two. And ulama have debated about what makes these two distinctive, either the same thing or different things, right? Now, if you treat them as exclusive categories, you reach problems because there's sometimes the prophets are referred to as bashar, right? So the main distinction between them being is that idea of the soul. Some people want to say that insan is exclusively the entity with the soul, whereas bashar is the entity before the soul. So if you look at verses, when Adam was being created, he's referred to as bashar. But when Adam was blown into the ruh, with the soul, with the spirit, then he's referred to as insan, right? He's referred to as insan. Now, that may work in some places in the Quran. However, there are other places where the prophets are even mentioned as bashar, right? Our Prophet ﷺ has mentioned bashar. So the idea, what exactly makes them distinctive, isn't really crystal clear. Regardless of that, what he said was that there were bashars before Adam alayhi salam. That's clear. There were bashars before him, right? However, what made Adam distinct is the ruh, is the soul. That idea exists, no doubt. That idea exists, no doubt. But whether we can claim that there were other human beings before Adam, because remember, humans or Homo sapiens is a scientific category. Bashar and insan is a Quranic vocabulary. How do they match is an open question right now. How can we say that bashar refers to a human, a Homo sapien, or whatever scientific terminology you want to use? That is a bit of a debate.
Right. Interesting. Jazakallah for that, Shaykh, because, and it does seem like that a lot of times, when new theories are coming, ulama and scholars are having to respond. What generally what we've seen is the majority of scholarship or ulama, because, and this is what I feel, right? Because they don't want to delve deep, or it's a difficult, it's not their territory to go into in terms of the scientific aspect of it. They just generally say, look, this is haram, or it's not something that we believe in, because Adam alayhi salam, there could be no connection between him and evolution. And then the one liner that we always get, are you trying to say that our great ancestors were monkeys? Which is again a myth and a misunderstanding of evolution as well. So just a quick, I do want to try and get through as many questions as possible. Some will be relevant, some will not be relevant. So what we can do is those that are not relevant, we can try and answer them as quickly as possible. And those that are relevant, we can take more time on them. Is that okay, Dr. Shoaib?
Yeah, I'm cool with anything, man.
So I like that. Today you seem really up for this, Sheikh.
Yeah, I'm chilled, Sheikh. I'm chilled.
Okay, so let's see what Salah Mesti says. Do you have a kind of program list of knowledge to acquire for seeking the truth? I mean, what has to be learned? What has learned first to have very good, healthy, and strong basics? Like, for example, number 1, logic. Number 2, epistemology. Number 3, philosophy of science. Number 4, critical thinking, aqidah, etc. Thank you for your help. So this is it, Dr. Shoaib. All your books that you've read. What is the juice of all of that, basically? Okay.
I like this motion, Sheikh. I don't know what was that. So, for me personally, I feel that when it comes to understanding how to deal with so many doubts that we have today, definitely constructive learning is very important. Now, no matter who you ask, they'll each have slightly different maybe ways of answering this. But I think fundamentally, at least this is what I say, is that get your aqidah fixed. Right? If you have that fixed, everything becomes much easier to understand. The reason why that is because aqidah is basically like a lens, right? It's like a lens. It's like a pair of glasses, and it allows you to correct any vision impairment that you have. Once that's on, of course, not blindly. I don't believe we should take these blindly. We have to obviously discuss them, understand them, their implications, and what have you, and then move on to things like logic, epistemology, philosophy of science, and philosophy of religion. I believe that definitely has to be accommodated. what happens is, unfortunately, is sometimes we either have people who are really well trained in the philosophy and the logic and epistemology, which is usually taught at university settings, and then we have people who are squarely good at the fiqh and the hadith and what have you. I think we need to have a very accommodating syllabus that allows you to explore all of these, but within a framework where your faith doesn't necessarily have to be jeopardized. Now, like I said, I'm not saying that faith is blind. I'm just saying that when you want to explore these questions, you should be able to do it with a teacher who's very well versed. Because sometimes what ends up happening is that people who are not trained enough, they may end up misguiding people or end up saying something that completely throws them off the track. So I feel that definitely we need a good mix of studies in Aqidah, Arabic I would definitely recommend, and at the same time having courses in logic, epistemology, philosophy of science, philosophy of religion, the interaction of science, religion, what have you. That's it, Sheikh Hamid. So I think Sheikh Hamid might have disconnected, guys. So feel free to keep throwing your questions at me. So I can't really choose the questions, but I'll see what I can get here. 1 second. Right. So we have Osama here. By the way, Saleh, let me know if I answered your question or not. If not, let me know, and I'll hopefully expand on that. We have a question here from Osama. Salam, Dr. Shoaib, why can't we view this universe as self-sustained, considering God can see the future? In other words, why would God interfere with our space and time if he placed its limits? Relating to that question, can we also view all our form of science, since we haven't yet explored all potential capabilities of science itself? So Osama, I think in regards to this question, it cannot be self-sustained because you are imposing something known as causal closure. You are assuming that the universe is closed. That's what you're assuming. That is not being argued for. So we can't necessarily, say that it is closed, that the universe has no interference from the outside. Number two, because God, like I said, one aspect of theology is, at least according to one strand, is that we believe that the way prophets establish themselves is through miracles. And since all of creation is within God's power, and he can easily, automatically, do whatever he wants from one moment to the other, he can easily do that. Remember, the universe is fundamentally and completely reliant upon God. That means whenever he so wills, he can change whatever he so wants. So it's a bit like the way I kind of explain this is, imagine if you have an animation, you have these time reels, right? So you have one time slice and another time slice, and when you flicker through them, it looks like a continuous motion. So it is very possible, and we see it in cartoons all the time, where all of a sudden there's nothing, and then the next second an anchor poofs out of nowhere, right? So from the animator's point of view, he just drew that in and put it in the next slide and then continued it, right? The same way, God and the universe is like the animation and the animator, that he can introduce changes whenever he so wills. So I hope that makes sense. And Osama, you said that can we also view the miracles as a form of science, since we haven't yet explored all potential capabilities of science itself? I do believe that some miracles are maybe open to scientific conjecture. I believe that is possible. So for instance, the whole idea of Moses' staff, it being converted into a snake? Well, for those of you, I know I'm going now really into comic books and all that. For those of you who know Marvel, or if you've heard of nanobots, right? So nanobots are these really tiny machines, like you cannot even see them. And basically, nanobots are so small, but they are able to change their configuration. So I can create a nanobot configuration, these tiny atomic-like particles. They can make themselves into the shape of a mug. And if I program them, I can then change their shape into something else, like a bed or a hair comb or what have you, right? So I can see that maybe there were some nanobots there. But you have to bear in mind that I think there's some things that are far beyond the territory of science, in the sense that I personally believe that the whole, the water being drawn out and being split, I don't think that can be explained by the science. I do believe it might be possible. So for example, we can think of force fields. You know how you have Star Trek, you have like a cool button, and then a force comes out and pushes the water apart. I think that's possible. Whether it's doable at the moment, I'm unsure. But I personally believe that miracles do not necessarily cannot necessarily be considered scientifically plausible. Possibly, I don't know, but I'm more inclined towards that. But I'm open to being debated about this. So I hope that answers your question, Sama. Jazib is asking a question here. We can reconcile evolution with Adam Islam because of Allah's works and miracles, but why is there an importance on Adam, not Hawa? How does Hawa come into the equation? So, Jazib, so if you believe in a strict evolution, that everything has to come through the product of evolution, then there will be a problem, because Adam cannot be a product of evolution. He is a miracle creation, right? We can believe that there are other humans who could have come out of human evolution, who could have been a product of evolution, but Adam himself is not possible. And now your question is, why is there importance of Adam and Hawa? So when we mean Adam, we mean Hawa as well. Like whenever, because the creation of Adam and Hawa are simultaneous in the sense that he was created and she was created out of his rib, right? If you believe that narration. So she was created out of that rib. And so when they were created, then they ate from the tree. Then Allah said, come down from heaven, I'll send you to earth. So both of them came down on earth. I'm just using Adam as a shorthand for him and Hawa. So I hope that makes sense, right? So Asadullah is asking, oh, Sheikh, you finally decided to come back, Sheikh. Hello, Sheikh. Hello, Sheikh. Sheikh. We can't hear you, Sheikh. You see, guys, so this is very similar to occasionalism, the way God works. He can pop you in existence. He can pop you out of existence just like that.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. We can, Sheikh. We can hear you, Sheikh. But Sheikh, your picture is very laggy, Sheikh. Guys, can you see Sheikh Hamid clearly, or is it just me? I feel that his picture is a little bit blurry.
Can you hear me now, Sheikh? Yes. I think yeah.
So
yeah, there's some kind of problem with my internet. But do carry on, Sheikh. We don't want this to have an effect on the session.
Sure. So now hang on. So now let me answer Asadullah's question. Dr. Shoaib Ahmad, just to be clear, you believe Adam was created miraculously, but you believe humans existed before him. And when you say other humans existed before, do you mean different than Homo sapiens? So Asadullah, I will clarify myself again. And by the way, this is not necessarily my opinion. I am saying this is an opinion that exists out there.
Dr. Shoaib, do carry on until I sort my internet out, but do carry on with what you're doing, inshallah.
Adios, Sheikh. Adios. Bye-bye. So now what I mean is, yes. So I believe, so the opinion, and this is the opinion developed by Sheikh Solomon Jalajal, he simply says that Adam was created miraculously, no problem whatsoever. That is very clear from the Quran and Hadith, and I agree with him on this point. I agree with him that you cannot have an evolutionary reading of Adam. The texts do not permit it, right? I mean, you have to read it, yani, do a lot of gymnastics with the Quran and Hadith to cater for that reading. But I'm saying that the Quran and Hadith do not negate, nor does it affirm humans existing prior to Adam's descent on earth. The Quran doesn't mention it, nor does the Quran talk against it. It's very similar to dinosaurs. The Quran doesn't talk against the existence of dinosaurs. The Quran doesn't talk for the existence of dinosaurs. Then both are possible. So whether you believe in dinosaurs or not, it has no impact on you as a Muslim. Similarly here, the idea of humans existing is possible. It's definitely in the realm of possibility. The Quran hasn't negated it, nor has the Quran affirmed it, like the dinosaurs. So if that's possible, there could have been humans there, right? And when Adam came, he integrated with them somehow, or some shape, some form. That is in all speculation. But is that possibility live? Yes. The Quran and Hadith allow that possibility. That's all I'm arguing for. Right. Okay. He's gone another world. So guys, I hope that answers your question. Feel to throw more questions at me. I don't have the control, so I can only see from the live comments that are coming in, inshallah. Salah Masti, let me know if I answered your question so that I can clear that off. Asadullah, let me know if I answered your question. Also, Jazib, let me know if I answered your question. Philosopher MMA, yes, let me know. Joaria, you have any questions? Okay, so Hussein is asking an interesting one. Are there branches in science which lead to Allah's intervention, Professor? So what do you mean by Allah's intervention? I didn't quite understand that. Do you mean like, is there anything in the science that tells us that God exists? Can you just clarify that for me so I can just be clear if that's what you're asking? Thank you. Hang on just 1 second, guys. Just sorting something out. Just 1 second, sorry. There we go. Yep, okay, sorry, back. So Hayder's asking, what would you say to those who insist that the Muslim world needs to implement the Darwinian evolution theory in order to progress scientifically, an idea supported by liberal Muslims? So I think, guys, we need to be very careful, right? Yes, we can accept evolution, that's not a problem. The whole idea about Muslims progressing and moving beyond the world that they're stuck in, this is not necessarily linked to evolution. It is a broader problem that is the consequences of colonialism and other political structures that exist around us. So this is not necessarily a problem of science. It's a much deeper rooted problem, which is the idea that we've had some kind of inferiority complex, that we have taken on some narratives that were not necessarily problematic within Islam and amongst Muslims. And the whole idea of being able to progress is something that because we have to bear in mind that the Muslims at one point in time were ahead of the game. They were the people, they were the creme de la creme. People used to travel to Muslims to study. That idea may seem ridiculous now, but that's what used to happen, right? It was known as, quote unquote, the golden age, right? It used to happen. But what led to the change of this power is a long historical political question. Science plays a part of it, but it's not the only component. I think to progress, we need to work collectively on several things, science being one of them. The other things we need to work on are our collective identity as what being a Muslim means, and also fashioning ourselves in some kind of political unit that we have seemed to have lost for the past 100 years. So I hope that made sense. Oh, Sheikh, you're back.
Yes, alhamdulillah. So just the slight problems. I think I'm back now. Can you hear me clearly enough now?
Yeah, we can. You're live and clear, Sheikh.
Cool. Just quick, were you just answering Haider Ali Akhlaq or Haider Ibn Akhlaq's question? Okay, fantastic. So I'm just going to go down to some that were interesting. There was a question from Juwaria, which I found is very relevant and good, and is here. If an atheist asks a Muslim to explain evolution in their own way, what should they say? And we're looking at, say, 11-year-old here, or 11, 12. You're at school and you've just studied evolution in your science lesson, right? Yep. And now an atheist comes forward who's done a bit of reading about evolution, and they say to a Muslim, okay, look, you're a Muslim, you believe in Adam being the first man and the whole miraculous thing. You don't believe in evolution because it's against your religion. So how would you, as a well-informed Muslim individual, respond to that atheist? What would you do, Professor Shoaib, if you were a 12-year-old Shoaib in a classroom, now having, in hindsight, have this information? How would you respond to that?
I'd say, cool. I believe in evolution, no problem. I wouldn't have an issue with that. I would say that, yeah, okay, evolution is our explanation of how these different biological entities came about. I don't have a problem with that. Do I have a problem with human evolution? No. Do I believe that Adam was a product of evolution? Yes. So I would not be able to accept Adam, but I don't have a problem with human evolution.
So why don't you accept? Why do you accept that Adam was part of this evolutionary process?
Right. The only reason why, because the Quran and Hadith are quite clear that Adam could not have parents. And the biggest verse that impedes this is the verse of similitude between Adam and Isa in Surah Imran, verse number 59. That is the main issue. And because I first believed, when I first encountered this territory, I thought it was possible. So I think that that's not an issue. But I don't believe that verse can be played with to cater for an evolutionary reading. So I hope that made sense. That can we accept evolution? Yes. Can we accept human evolution? It's possible for sure. It doesn't contradict the idea that there were humans prior to Adam's descent, and they evolved from evolution. But can we accept that that Adam was a product of evolution? Difficult. That would be difficult. This is where we'd have to kind of say, no, sorry, not possible. And fundamentally, the issue is, guys, that the idea of whether the science is true or not is a different question. The more deeper question is, do they accept miracles? And if they don't accept miracles, then khalas, that's it. That's the end of the game. Because it's not just Adam that's going to be a problem. It's every other prophetic story in the Quran that's going to be an issue. The idea of the moon splitting, the idea of the sea splitting apart of Moses, the staff of Moses being converted to a snake, all of those are going to be issues. Every one of them, right? So do not just think that if you want to concede that, okay, Adam had a parent, well, then you have to explain the rest of the Quran. And if you do that arbitrarily, then you're playing games with scripture. That's the problem here. You're playing a game.
Jazib is saying something here that Dr. Isar Ahmed answered Juwairiyah's question by saying no change in species can happen without a kun from Allah.
Yep. So, Dr. Isar, I actually have a paper out on him that I hope gets accepted somewhere. So there's a paper that I wrote where I actually investigate Dr. Israr's proposal. He basically says that there are two layers of reality. Okay, there's alam al-khalq and there's alam al-amr, right? So khalq means the physical universe that we live in. Alam al-amr, however, is the world of the command. It's a metaphysical world, doesn't occupy time and space. And every single change that happens here in alam al-khalq has to happen there. So Allah says kun, it is in alam al-amr, and then a change is enforced of whatever that kun represents. So that happens with everything. That doesn't necessarily happen with just one thing. That happens with every single thing in Dr. Israr Ahmed's worldview.
Right. Jazakallah for that, Sheikh. So I hope, Juwairiyah, that answers your question. Let's see the next question, because I'm trying to go in some kind of order here. Salam Hazrat Maulana. So the titles keep on increasing.
Dr. Hamid, so Sheikh Hamid, I think you need to pay heed to Zahra's question. Ustad Hamid, do you have the button for when Dr. Shoaib is using complicated words? You have to pay attention.
Oh, yeah, I do have it somewhere. I think every time I keep it next to me, Baraka, my daughter, she keeps on taking it and playing with it. So yes, I'm actually going to get back into that mode. The only difference is I'll have to make those noises with my mouth, if that's okay.
That's fine, Sheikh.
Okay, which animal would you be okay with, Sheikh?
A duck, Sheikh.
A duck. I thought you would say a Neanderthal.
Well, Sheikh, we don't know how to sound.
Right, okay. So, yeah, I will do that, inshallah. So let's see what Imran Ali is saying. Salams Hazrat Maulana. So the titles keep on increasing, Sheikh. I have a friend who has asked me this question, and as you are discussing different topics, I would like to ask a question. Is a Muslim man allowed to marry a practicing Christian woman? If yes, how is the nikah performed? So that's a very interesting question, Sheikh. So I think...
this has nothing to do with Islam and evolution. I'm not going to answer this. So I'll answer this, okay? Not my pay grade. This is not my pay grade. Ask a mufti. That will be my answer to this.
Yeah. And I think especially in this kind of question, these need to be private fatwas. And I'm saying that because your local ulama, they will know the situation better. If you're just asking in general if it's allowed, of course, I mean, we all know that it's allowed fiqh-wise. But the question you're asking, how is it going to go ahead and what is it going to look like? What form and shape is it going to take? Then all I'm going to say is you've got to ask your local imam, local mufti or local alim to sit down with them, discuss the whole thing, see how it works and progresses. So that's the answer for that. You've got to get your local imam who you trust, local ulama who you trust. But we will carry on from there. Well done. Keep up the good work. I hope that answers your question. Yes, Sheikh. Let's move on. So can I just... Yes, Juwairiyah, we're live at the moment. All right. Juwairiyah has just bought me the buzzer, Sheikh.
Oh, great.
Right. Jazakallah, Juwairiyah. Okay, let's move on to philosopher MMA. So, Sheikh, I am going to be using this because Zahra has specially mentioned. Dawkins once said that Darwin refuted the intelligent design argument by introducing evolution by natural selection, and he said that we are waiting for Darwin of the universe to refute the fine-tuning argument.
Right.
Could you
Okay.
explain? So there's lots of on that. So could you maybe explain the whole context of this and what fine tuning is as well, and natural selection for our younger viewers?
Sure. So, first of all, who is Richard Dawkins? For those of you who don't know, Richard Dawkins is one of the biggest names of New Atheism. In fact, I would say he's the face of New Atheism. He's a British biologist.
Could you maybe explain what is New Atheism? Because I mean, it'll be
You've got to be kidding me. Buzzing on New Atheism?
Yeah, I'm keeping. I'm trying to be as facilitating for our 7 and 8 year olds.
Right. Okay.
And I think it's important to have a bit of an idea of what this is.
Right. New Atheism is simply a movement, a new movement that started off since after 9/11 or 2001. And this movement is headed by a few individuals. Many of them are prominent scientists and public speakers. The primary guy behind this movement is known as Richard Dawkins. He's a very famous Oxford biologist, has written a lot of stuff on evolution. And his narrative is basically that evolution has pretty much proven that religion is untrue, it is false. And he criticizes anyone who rejects evolution. In response to evolution, so one of the elements of evolution is that the whole process is very random. It's very chance-based, right? So whenever mutations, so remember, human beings and every other animal entity out there, we have this part that you can see and the part that where our blueprint is, where our design is, right? And that part is known as your DNA. DNA is basically your fundamental biological unit. And the theory of evolution says, so mutations occur on the genes, mutations occur there, and then it produces change in your physical features, right? And over millions of years, that's how we begin to see so many different species, right? So it's very possible that me and you share a lineage with dinosaurs. I mean, that would be pretty cool for me. I personally like the idea of sharing a lineage with a T-Rex, Sheikh. I don't know, Sheikh, what do you think about that? But that would be pretty sick. That would be pretty cool. So so that's what evolution says in a nutshell. Now, there's a new movement. Well, not a new movement. There's a movement that came out around the 1980s, which pretty much argued against the theory of evolution because of this inherent randomness in the process. And they believe that there are some changes within the course of history that have been that are so complex, so specific, that to say that these are products of chance is very problematic, right? And we need to, in fact, posit a designer, that this could not come about by natural processes. It could not come across by chance. We need to then posit a designer for it, right? And this is known as the intelligent design argument. And the people who advocate it are called the ID theorists, right? That's what they're known as. Now, basically, whether randomness works with or against us is, first of all, a theological question. The question that we need to address is, first and foremost, is it problematic for us to believe that the universe created randomly? Not a problem. Because God can automatically create a universe that seems very chance-like to us. It's completely possible, right? So I personally believe that if so the idea of randomness does not need any criticism from our side. It only needs criticism if you believe that God cannot create things that are chaotic. As I mentioned before, God can do anything that is logically possible. What I mean by that is he can create this a cup, he can convert to a monkey, a snake in the next moment, however he sees befitting, right? It's completely chaotic, no problem whatsoever. He can create the whole universe so bizarrely different from what it is, with no scientific laws whatsoever. It's completely chaotic. Can God create such a universe? He can. So my issue is that the intelligent design movement is pretty much trying to argue the science of evolution on a theological level. I think it's a mismatch, right? I think it's a basic problem. Now, whether we should adopt intelligent design, I'm not so sure. I'm quite critical of the intelligent design movement myself, because for me, whether the universe is designed or not Either way, it doesn't disprove God's existence. If the universe was designed, or if it wasn't designed, it doesn't eliminate the idea that God exists. So for me, the intelligent design argument and the people who advocate it are, I think, mistaken, at least in what they're trying to criticize here.
Right. Okay. Just to shout out that there are a lot of questions which we may not be able to answer, but we are going to try and get through as many as we can, and some are just kind of hidden away amongst the many questions that are answered or have not been answered. Okay. So Hussein's asking a question. I'm trying to prioritize our students as well. So Hussein is asking, are there branches in science which leads to Allah's doings?
He asked this question before, but I don't. So I'm assuming that does science point towards God? That's the question.
Let's
right?
go with that. Let's go with that. And Hussein, you can correct us if it's something else. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, look, we need to ask a more deeper question here. Let's just say Allah created a universe where you cannot do science. As I mentioned before in the beginning of this session, is that science requires regularity. If there is no regularity, science is not possible. So if the theory of gravity holds today, but it doesn't hold tomorrow, that theory is gone. You can no longer say that's the theory of the universe. Similarly here, what I want to ask is, can God create universes which do not have regularity? And the answer is yes. So having a universe or having a creation which is scientific does not undermine God's existence. Okay, it doesn't undermine it. Now, we are designed in a way, we have in us, that whenever we see complexity, we automatically think of a designer, right? Now, when we look at the universe, it does seem to be a complex entity. It's very, very systematic. It's very well organized. I mean, there are, of course, objections to these, but we feel in awe when we look at the universe. It's just been beautifully designed for us to see. And so you could use that as a kind of phenomenon. It's like, wow, subhanAllah, how beautifully did Allah design the universe. But even if that did not exist, if a universe that is binding to science or has scientific aspects to it, if it did not exist, it doesn't mean God does not exist. That's the point that I want to draw here.
Yeah. Jazakallah for that. And Hussein, if there's any other questions, do let us know. Let's move over to Usama. He says, Salam, Dr. Shoaib. Why can't we view this universe as...
when you went to occasionalism, when you just disappeared, Sheikh.
Brilliant. Okay, so have you answered this one?
Sorry?
There's this from Jazib. We can reconcile evolution with Adam alayhi salam because
I'd answer this, Sheikh. Again, when
okay, brilliant. Sheikh. Okay, extremely sorry about that, Sheikh. And I'm assuming you answered but Asadullah. Maybe he's a doctor.
Yep.
Asadullah's questions. Okay, brilliant. Okay, well done, Sheikh. Let's move on.
Talal, I think is the next question.
Talal, okay. So let's Salah Mesti here as well a few times. Have you seen this one? For the Aqidah, I have plenty of courses like Shara Tahawi, Kitab al-Tawheed. Hope you understand my need.
I think this is continuation from a previous point, Sheikh.
Previous question. Sure. Okay. Okay. Right. Let's move on.
Okay, Zahra, so I'm coming back to let me know if evolution made sense to you, because I think she said that she had several issues with this topic.
Okay. Yep. So Zahra, if there's any questions, please put them down from here on. Jazakallah for the answers, but would you say that Adam alayhi salam and Hawa alayhi salam were the most sentient, capable, aware, and knowledgeable creation of Allah among all the species that existed at the time? Have you answered that question?
So I think so. Hang on, Sheikh. We just have an issue here.
No problem.
Just 1 second. Sorry.
No problem.
Right. Okay. There you go. Right. So what was I saying? What were you saying?
The question's on the screen. I don't know if you've answered Jazib's question or not. About Hawa and Adam alayhi salam, both of them being the most capable, aware, intelligent beings amongst all the species that existed at the time.
Right. I would say so. I mean, I think it's I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, I think that what makes us distinct is our consciousness, our capability to reason and explore and all of that. That is what makes us distinctively unique. I don't think that is that is something I would disagree with.
Yep. Let's move on to Ferrino Jackson. Can't we consider this pre-human fossils as something like human-like animals, which we Banu Adam are considered to be a descendant of because of taxonomy on the basis of a naturalistic outlook?
It's possible. Like I said, I don't see that being problematic, because bear in mind that even now scientists are finding these new human-like fossils, Neanderthals, Homo florensis, Australopithecus. Oh, I can't say these names. That's why I hate biology. Australopithecus, something along those lines, right?
Australopithecus afarensis robustus.
Yes, there we go, Sheikh.
Okay.
So you know better than me, Sheikh. I really dislike
quite like that
taxonomy,
word.
Sheikh. I really dislike taxonomy, Sheikh. I remember I struggled in bio because of this reason. So yeah, all these, and they have very similar structures to us. So it's very plausible. I think that's entirely plausible. There's no doubt about it. But the key thing here is, so Zahra says, buzzer duck sound, please. So I think she's saying.
Yeah, don't worry.
So,
I've got the real one, so we don't need duck sound anymore.
Okay, yeah. So Zahra, basically, these are names of entities that are very similar to us in terms of the way we look. They walked on two legs. They had hands. They had facial features like us, and they seem to have some basic rudimentary speech. So these are very, very similar, closely in time to us. In fact, there's now evidence that we actually coexisted at some point in time. So this is what I mean by when I say these different terms, that there were different species or different groups of entities that have a very close physical proximity to human beings.
There's a question here which is interesting. Do you agree that part of the reason why the Sahaba, and just for our students again, Sahaba, a group of people who were the ones who saw Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, they were his companions, okay? Do you agree that the part of the reason why the Sahaba are the best Muslims is they believed without detailed explanations or understandings, i.e. science, where today we are weaker as we require detailed explanation? What would you say to that, Dr. Shoaib?
Of course, I mean, you got to bear in mind that each age has its own challenges, right? In that age, yes, it was easy to believe because the Prophet was there, but it's also very hard to believe in because they made so many sacrifices. Yeah. I mean, if somebody from the desert said to you, I'm a prophet, follow me, do hijrah with me, fight with me, go to war with me, would you do it? It had its challenges. Nowadays, well, of course, we have our different challenges. And I think on even, I don't know whether they're equated to or not. Now, have we seen the Prophet? No. Do we have evidence of him? Yes. But and are there more reasons to maybe doubt? Yes, but there are also more reasons to believe, right? So I think that every age has its challenges, and it comes with each one comes with its own balance.
And also another thing, Sheikh, science, the kind of progress that science has made and our understanding of the world in general is much more than it would have been 1400 years ago. And whenever the companions had any doubts, they directly had access to the Prophet of Allah. And he directly had access to Allah to, get the answers. So we no longer have that, but we do have different forms and types of knowledges out there for us to access, and science being one of them. I mean, Islam has no problem with science in that sense because Islam has
no problem with science. Islam has a problem with scientism.
Absolutely, yes. And as Dr. Shoaib mentioned before, scientism is actually a worldview. It's not really science in itself. It's just the belief that science has all the answers, kind of thing, including your ethics and morality and all of that. Okay, so that's Jazakallah for that, Talal. Okay, I think we've answered Hussein's question. Okay, we've answered that. Okay, so we'll come back to Jazib now. Jazib is saying, would multiverse fit in the idea of randomness by Allah's creation? There might be a parallel universe where Dr. Shoaib would be a part of the intelligent design movement. Would you like to answer that, Sheikh?
It's completely possible. I have nothing against that. I think that's completely possible, no doubt whatsoever. I think that's no issues with that whatsoever. Okay. But if I got to meet that Shoaib, I would seriously have a chat with him. So
would you like to explain for our younger viewers what is multiverse?
Right. Okay. So multiverse is this simple idea that we seem to have indications. We don't have proof for this, but we have indications that our universe may not be the only universe out there. In fact, there may be other parallel universes that are very close to ours to some extent, and some are very different to ours. So, for example, there might be a universe out there in which there's another variation of you, but maybe that variation is, I don't know, the president of a country, right? So there are these kinds of realities that exist out there.
Right. Jazakallah for that.
Barakallah feek.
Philosopher MMA, can we say that universe is infinite because we know that Allah is the only infinite?
I think Noor put a comment up here. She said that it's wrong to say the universe is infinite because the universe is accelerating finitely. Can you put that up, Sheikh? Because I think
I'm going to have a look.
So it was Noor. I think she made a very good point.
If I may dare answer, we don't say that the universe is infinite.
Yeah.
It's finite and in accelerated expansion.
Yeah.
Could we maybe get an explanation of that in 8-year-old terms? Yeah.
So basically, the universe does not go on forever. It has a limited space, a limited amount, but it's just expanding very quickly, like a balloon. That's all what she's trying to say in 8-year-old language.
Right. Cool. Right. Okay, let's move on. I'm just trying to be careful that I don't miss anyone's question out. Right, Usama is back. Right, Sheikh, here's a question for you.
Can we consider psychedelics to be part of the evolution of humans? I have no clue, to be honest with you. I have no clue. I mean, you'd have to be on psychedelics to be able to ask that question. I have no clue, man. I wouldn't know how to answer that.
Well, here's the second part, Sheikh, if you want to carry on with that.
Oof. So I know. So for those of you who don't know psychedelics, right? In very simple terms, these are like drugs that basically give you hallucinations, or, according to some people, a deeper insight into reality, right? So for instance, we've had people in the past use psychedelics or drugs to induce some kind of experience of the metaphysical world, the spiritual world. So they do have an impact. What is the Islamic understanding of them? I don't know. I think you need to ask a mufti who maybe has looked into this. I'm not a mufti, so I cannot answer that.
Okay, barakallah for that. We have Ustada Noor back with us. She's saying, NB, the expansion, though, is going indefinitely, but the universe will always be finite. Okay. In terms of space and time. Okay, so that's where we are at the moment. Okay, the philosopher is back. Did Ibn Sina believe in eternal universe, but depended on God? Even Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle believed in the eternal universe, but also believed in God, or in a God of some sort.
Yeah, I think he believed in eternal universe, and that was one of the main issues that Ghazali had with Ibn Sina. Yeah, that's right.
So, I mean, having belief like that, I mean, we're coming to Aqidah. Where does that place you in terms of Aqidah?
I think that Imam Ghazali was quite harsh with Ibn Sina. I think he said that this is kufr. It's kufr to believe that it exists on forever. I think maybe a softer judgment would be that this was a mistaken idea. Yeah, so I would.
But do you think someone as great as Ibn Sina would have such a mistaken idea, knowing the text?
You have to understand it. So don't just take an idea and then criticize him on that. You have to understand his entire worldview that he occupied, and then how that situates in that entire worldview that you can make that claim. And bear in mind, Ibn Sina is one of the most amazing intellects of Islamic intellectual history.
Yeah.
While he may have made a few mistakes, he contributed a lot towards improving Islamic thinking. He was actually, there's a lot of studies now that suggest that even Ibn Sina impacted Ghazali's own thoughts.
Interesting.
Right? So I wouldn't undermine Ibn Sina.
Yep, absolutely. Right. It looks like we have come to the end of questions. If I have missed out your questions, please could you put them down again, because there were so many questions and I had to actually go all the way down to fix my internet. So if I've missed anything out, it wasn't on purpose. Please do put your questions down again. Okay, Jazib is here. I would say not to promote psychedelics, by the way. there have been people in history who have died by drinking mercury because they thought exiles and psychedelics to be great liquids.
Mhm. Mhm. I'd agree with that.
So,
I think that's a
okay.
very good cautious answer. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely anything that induces like alterations of normal consciousness have to be questioned. But what is the quote unquote fiqh or Islamic response to that? Strongly recommend speaking to doctors and ulama about this.
Yep. Absolutely. Do you use Ibn Sina's contingency argument or Thomas Aquinas' contingency argument? Oh, I like. We're back to contingency, Sheikh. So whose
Yes.
contingency argument are you using? Is it Ibn Sina or Thomas Aquinas? Or is there a third entity that we're unaware of?
I'm seriously, I doubt if there's a difference between the two, because Aquinas pretty much relied a lot on Ibn Sina's works. So I would doubt if there's a difference.
Okay, so you're taking from both. Is that the answer?
I would say they're one and the same.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Okay. So we've got Hussein. Why does science have nature as a source of information for it? So again, just to let everyone know, Hussein, one of our students, about 9 years old. So if you can maybe explain that, Sheikh. Why does science have nature as a source of information? How are you going to approach this?
So, okay. So think of things like tools, right? So we use hammers to drill, nails in the wall. We use wrenches to be able to tighten nails, right? We use tools for their designation. Science is the designation of studying the natural world. That is its purpose, to study the natural world, right? Same way, when I want to study Islamic text, I'm not going to put chemistry and physics on the table and study usul hadith or Quran and hadith, right? So the same way, when I want to understand nature, I have to use the tools of science. Now, this is a very different question as to why why nature has information in it. The simple answer is because of laws of nature, and those natures are put in by God. So that's it. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. And just to correct
Sheikh,
one of
you
my...
misrepresented Hussein, Sheikh. You've been
exactly.
giving me the impression he's 7 or 8 years old.
No, sorry,
he's
that was
actually
Kamran.
11 years old.
That's right. That was Kamran, Sheikh. Kamran is 8, but Hussein is 11. So I think it's the lockdown getting to me, but Hussein is 11. That's right. It is Kamran who is 8. And I don't know if Kamran is with us or not at the moment. But yes, Jazakallah for that. Zahra is saying, Dr. Shoaib, you smiled a lot in this particular session. MashaAllah.
Alhamdulillah.
The philosopher MMA. Which Ibn Sina and Ghazali's book would you recommend on Islamic philosophy?
Oh man, I would recommend The Healing, Ash-Shifa, that's the name of it in Arabic. I'd recommend Tahafut al-Falasifa. I'd recommend the Iqtisad. So I recommend those books.
Cool. Right, let's move on. We are coming to the end of our session, even though Dr. Shoaib wants to carry on today. Am I right, Dr. Shoaib?
Yeah, I'm cool. I love how everything about what we discussed, like literally 0 questions have been about Islam and evolution.
I think it's been 6 weeks since we've been discussing evolution. Everyone has been satisfied. That's what I'm getting here, Sheikh. So Jazib is saying, philosopher MMA spoke of Socrates above. Socrates was tried and sentenced to death for blasphemy and corruption of the youth, for denying the Greek gods.
Mm-hmm. That's a statement, Sheikh. That's not a question.
So do you agree, disagree? What would you say about this, Sheikh?
Yeah, that's what history says, Sheikh. He died. That's how he died. Yeah.
Yeah, but in terms of the denying Greek gods, he wasn't denying the God that he believed in, right?
No. He had his own conception of gods, and he found the conception of the Greek gods wanting. He felt that they weren't living up to rational demonstration.
Yeah. Oh, just one question I had, Sheikh, and this is something that just popped up in my head now. I remember when I was back at university studying Abrahamic religions, and we looked at Socrates and Plato. There were some people at the time, and I couldn't remember, they were Muslims, who were saying that it's potentially possible for Greek scholars like Aristotle, Plato, to have been they could have been prophets.
Could be, yeah. I mean, I definitely I wouldn't have an issue believing that Plato was a prophet, Plato is, I mean, he was very interesting, man. He was like one of those. He really influenced me a lot. Like I'm very, very close to Plato in my own understanding of things. But I have no problem considering that they might have been prophets, because
What
the amount
about
of knowledge.
Socrates and yeah?
Even Socrates, I think he could have been a prophet. Oh well, I think he was very inspired. Maybe not necessarily a prophet, but very inspired. Because the thing is, like, if you look into their lives based on sketches that we have of fragments here and there, Sheikh, Plato used to fast. Plato used to fast. He wouldn't eat on days, right? That struck me a lot. Why would he fast, right? So I definitely felt that there was this, and his whole philosophy is very fitri in the sense. So I do believe that there might be scope for that there.
Yeah, that's, just to add to that as well. When I was at university at Hithrop College, one of our lecturers was a very famous philosopher, and he's written many A-level textbooks. Dr. Peter Vardy. I don't know if you've heard of him, Sheikh. Professor Peter Vardy. So most of the A-level books in philosophy you find around here was written by him. And at university, and when it comes to philosophers and their concept of death and how to, constantly think about death, what he had in his office, right, was his coffin. So every time he walked into the university, he would he would remember death every single day. Isn't that fascinating, Sheikh?
I think that's very deep, Sheikh. I think that's a very existentialist individual, that he lives every day knowing where he's going to.
Yeah. And he never told anyone whether he followed any religion. He kept that private. So no one knew what religious beliefs that he had. But this is something that he did, where he had his coffin inside his office at the university. And it kind of reminded me of, within Islam, you have the ihram, that you walk around in Hajj with those two cloths, which potentially you could use for burial. And it's to remind us again that that's where we are heading. And it's an important reminder for us, because ultimately that's reality for us. We're just here for a short period of time. And ultimately, once we're dead, that's the journey of our life. It continues. It's not, I mean, do you think we have the concept of death wrong, as in the end of everything? How would philosophers have seen that? Or how
Plato, for example, believed that the soul was eternal. He believed the universe was that the soul was eternal, right? So like I said, the reason why Plato and Aristotle are so famous. So this is to also in part to address the question of Zahra. So the starting foundations of philosophy are three people: Socrates, who was the teacher of Plato, and Plato, who was the teacher of Aristotle, right? So these were teachers of one another. And these guys produced some amazing ideas and works that they set the precedent for the next 2,000 years. These guys existed in 500 BC, right? To the extent that they have impacted Christian theology, a lot of Platonic and Aristotelian ideas have been absorbed. They have also impacted Islamic thought. Ibn Sina is highly Platonic and Aristotelian. He's absorbed some ideas of theirs. So their influence has reached far and wide. Far, far and wide. Even today, till now, the starting courses in philosophy, Plato, Aristotle are the first names you will hear, right? So Plato and Aristotle and Socrates are really interesting individuals to look into. I hope I answered that question as well, Zahra.
Absolutely. And I had something. Yeah. So just one thing on the side. So when we talk about Anbiya and Rusul, right? Having that in the back of our minds, and then looking at, for instance, and I know we're never going to get to the bottom of this because it's too far-fetched in that sense, but Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, I mean, when it comes, if someone was to try and define them under Anbiya and Rusul, isn't there, when it comes to prophets coming with a text, a sacred text, or emphasizing a previous text, we don't find that with these three individuals.
Yeah, so that's why. So that's why I would say that maybe they had some inspiration on certain ideas that God gave them. Maybe they might not have been prophetic, you see, but they did have prophetic lives. I felt they did have prophetic lives.
Prophetic lives, yeah, and that goes back to which one of our viewers mentioned that that Socrates was sentenced to death because he was blasphemous against the Greek gods at the time, because he had his own idea about God. But yeah, that's interesting. Okay, let's move on to Unais, Doctor, as an argument from Islamic scholars to the Quran can't translate in its perfect way, as we can say the translations we have today is not Quran, and Quran includes scientific knowledge. Now, I don't understand. I don't know if you understand what that refers to. Maybe,
I don't.
Unais, if you would like to maybe kind of elaborate on that a bit more, that'd be very helpful. Zahra saying, I remember when you came and did the talk at FEP, okay, about scientific miracles. So Zahra, well done for that. Dr. Shoaib, Dr. Israr believed in Wahdatul Wujud, a notion similar to panentheism. What's your opinion on it?
Wahda Wujud is not something I personally occupy. If he believes it, okay. Fair enough.
So you don't occupy. Okay. Plato was a student of Socrates and the teacher of Aristotle. Okay, let's move on. Okay. We have XV team. Hey, I'm a bit late, and I don't know if this been asked or not, but do you think that Noah's flood was global? That's an interesting question, Dr. Shoaib.
That's interesting. I've been having a Facebook conversation about this over the past day or two, and so there's this whole idea about whether the flood of where by which Noah had to create the boat and he had to get all these animal species on it, whether that's a local flood. What we mean by that, did that flood happen in a particular area, or was that a global flood? So the flood encompassed the entire world. And ulama have debated about this, scholars have debated about this, and there's plausibilities on either side. Do you need to make a decision? Nope. It's irrelevant because there's no specific detail enough in the Quran and Hadith to be able to make a case. So scripturally, it doesn't really matter. So whether you believe, whether it's global or local, it doesn't really matter. I particularly side with the local. If you're asking for me personally, I side with the local. I don't believe that it was global for various reasons. Primarily, the sedimentation. So when you have floods, they impact the sediment layers, right? And there seems to have been certain properties that we find in the Mesopotamian region. This is, think of, okay, just to put it on a large scale, think of the Middle East and slightly maybe northern part of Africa. So those territories, they have a very thick sedimentation, which corresponds to heavy raining, right? Or a lot of flood or flooding. But that doesn't seem to be uniform everywhere. So as a result, I don't think that it was global, right? So that's I think my primary evidence that I don't believe that it was a global event. It was a very local event. God knows best at the end of the day. Whether you accept it or not, it doesn't really matter in the long scale of things.
Cool. Dr. Israr Ahmed also felt that Darwin doesn't explain the spiritual being of the human mind. Of all the evolution mechanisms, which ones do that? Is soulful consciousness a miraculous gift from Allah?
So science can never explain spirituality. So that wouldn't be a surprise if evolution doesn't explain that, because it's not in the business of science to talk about immaterial things. Its function is to look at nature. So out of all the explanations of evolution, you're not going to get one explanation that will talk about how consciousness came about. Have there been attempts? Yes. Have they been successful? No. We have some very interesting insight about neurology, our brain circuits, and what have you. But in terms of being able to explain the soul, no. And is the soul a gift from Allah? I think everything is a gift from Allah for us. Consciousness should not be excluded.
Maybe Jazib is saying in relation to animals, for instance.
Yeah. I mean, in relation to animals, we have this gift that they don't have. Yeah, of course.
Okay. Does Islam allow meditation similar to Eastern religions, like the Sufis say Rasulullah meditated in the cave of Hira before his prophethood?
Okay. If you're asking for a fiqh opinion, speak to Mufti. If you're asking for my personal opinion, I have no problem doing meditation according to Eastern religion. It doesn't make any difference.
Right. At the end of, this is Zahra Ashraf, one of our students. At the end of the day, Allah knows everything. Allah is Almighty, and Allah even knows that you haven't even thought about. We are very lucky to have you explaining and answering questions, Dr. Shoaib.
Thank you, Zahra. That's very sweet of you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, in relation to animals, that's fine. Oh, we have Athar Waqar here with us, who's saying how we should teach evolution in Islamic school. And that's a brilliant question. In madrasa, in Muslim world, with minimal resistance and maximal positive attitude towards theology and science.
So evolution Islam is one. It's not going to address anything. It's part of a bigger discussion of how we need to understand science and religion first of all. And this is where Saleh's question about how do we understand what is the perfect curriculum to be able to understand all of these things around us. So this is not necessarily going to be fixed just by Islam and evolution. But putting that aside for a second, I think the way to kind of address evolution Islam is to be frank. You have to be frank. These are the limitations of science. This is the constraint of hermeneutics or usul al-hadith or usul al-tafsir. And then you say, be clear, frank with yourself. How far can you interpret Quran and hadith? How far can you take the evolutionary narrative? And that's it. And then be frank about what position you need to adopt, right? What ends up happening, unfortunately, is that theologians who are stuck in theology, who will never even understand the science, completely just put the science aside. Step the science as if it's nothing, right? Vice versa, the scientists will step over and not even care about the hadith or what have you. So we need to be wary of these simple binaries. So in fact, I've been invited for a presentation. I'm a keynote speaker for a topic that I wrote. We'll call it's basically addressing your question, Athar. It's addressing your question. How can we make the understanding of Islam and evolution accessible to young Muslims, educators, scientists, and theologians? It addresses this question. It's a 15,000 word paper that hopefully will be coming out in a book, inshallah. And I'll be presenting this, inshallah. You can register for this. Sheikh, that link that I was posting? Epistemic Insight. It's a conference. I'll hopefully share the details with you, but that will be happening on the 22nd of June. So I am trying to hopefully address this, inshallah, so that people have a very clear paper in front of them.
So, Dr. was that the event you were going to come to UK for?
Yes.
But you're now going to do it online, I guess.
Yeah. And Sheikh, make dua.
Brilliant.
They're not refunding my flight ticket, Sheikh. British Airways is such a con artist, Sheikh.
It's interesting, Sheikh. They've been doing this for past few hundred years, Sheikh, especially during colonization.
Yeah.
The process continues, but in very different ways. Okay. Yeah. Tell me when you get tired, Sheikh, because our viewers are definitely not tired yet. And also, just in regards to Dr. Shoaib's lecture, which he was speaking about, we will inshallah post it on Dr. Shoaib, his own Facebook, my Facebook, and both our madrasa Facebook and social media as well, and we'll make sure that you find out about it. Also on this video in the comments we'll put a link there as well, so if you do want to sign up, it's which university is it, Sheikh?
I don't remember, Sheikh.
Wait, but anyway, we will have the link. We will have the link down here somewhere. So if you need to, you can join.
I can actually send you the link now because the organizer actually sent me that. So Aga, so there we go. So yes. So Sheikh, I've just sent it to you, so you can post it anytime now.
You sent it to me where, so I can just directly get it from there. On WhatsApp.
Yep, I just sent you a WhatsApp, Sheikh, so you can feel free.
Okay,
now.
I'm just right. So whoever's interested in Doctor's lecture on 22nd June, right?
Yep, 22nd June.
I'm just writing sign up, and the link is there below. So if you are interested, do sign up after this session, or if you can multitask, you can do that now. So I've just got that coming up now. Bismillah. Here we go. That's the link that Professor Shoaib has just sent me, which I've put up both on Facebook and also YouTube as well. Unais Uns, Dr. Quran. So Dr. Quran have a lot of explanations, even in philosophical and scientific way. But those explorations are human-made. Here, how a human-made explanations on God's words can be considered. I think talking about hermeneutics, possibly. Approaching the text, the sacred texts.
Right.
I'm still
okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I'm not, like I said, I'm unsure about. I'm really unsure about this question because I don't know what exactly is being stressed here. If you're asking me whether there are scientific miracles in the Quran, no. I am actually very critical of people who advocate for that. I think it's a very, very silly argument frankly speaking. There's no such thing as scientific miracles in the Quran. Every kind of point that you bring out, I can easily refute it. That's because the Quran is not a scientific manual. The Quran aligns with science because it's vague enough to be able to map with anything, except maybe evolution per se. But otherwise, it's not a scientific book.
There was something interesting, Dr. Joe. I'm just going to grab it now. Give me a second.
Yep.
Right. So here's a book, Sheikh, that I bought from a bookshop in Dewsbury. Around, I think it must have been at least around between 15 years ago. And it's a book that I read like really carefully, and I really enjoyed the book. You may not like the book. And then when I was going through the bookshelves, I saw it, and I think the first time I saw it in the last 15 years, and it brought back so many memories. Yeah, would you like to see the book?
Sheikh, 1 second. Somebody said that the link is not working. Let me just resend you the link because they're with the hyperlink because it's in an email. 1 second.
Sure, go for it.
Yeah. Okay, I got it now. So Sheikh, I sent it to you on private chat here on StreamYard. You should be able to now share it. It should work perfectly now.
Okay, I'm waiting for it to come through. Oh, on private chat. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll just checking it up now. Oh yeah, that looks better.
Yeah,
the other one was quite long. Yeah.
So
I'm going to put that up again.
So we have some very big speakers coming here to talk about exactly how to educate people of their respective traditions on territories on science or religion. I submitted my paper. It got accepted, alhamdulillah. And basically, the idea of this conference, at least my presentation, is how do you break down the conversation of Islam and evolution to educators, to young Muslims, to parents. Even parents can understand that. So regardless of your background, regardless whether you are a scientist, not a scientist, mufti, not a mufti, professional, not a professional, no matter what you come from, you should be able to take this and understand it and understand everything, inshallah, in terms of where the debates, how you should not be going about the debates, etc. So even at the end, I'll have a table where there's several opinions and you choose for yourself at the end of the day. That's the point, inshallah, to give you guys flexibilities and possibilities. Yes, Sheikh, coming back to your book.
Can you read that for me, Sheikh?
120 evident miracles of the Holy Quran. Okay.
130 evident miracles of the Holy Quran.
Okay.
So they brought up so many scientific miracles in the Quran, Sheikh. So one was an interesting one that I remembered when I looked at the cover was وَأَنزَلْنَا الْحَدِيدَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ, that we sent down iron from the skies, and saying that iron is something that's not really from Earth, it was from outside. So that was one of the miracles that was brought up. What's your take on that?
How is that a miracle? That's my question.
The reason why they say this author, I think, and I'm going back 15 years, so I can't remember the exact thing, but what they're saying is, look, someone 14 centuries ago in a desert, how would they have had the knowledge of such an occurrence, of such a thing?
Right. So you see, the way we can easily refute that is by simply saying, if a civilization before Islam or before Muslims had that, it immediately nullifies this, right? And the fact of the matter is, this information existed beforehand. It existed beforehand. It did. So I mean, that's so this is no longer a valid, like, quote unquote miracle, right? So I don't understand why this is miraculous. It's a statement that Allah is making. We have chosen to interpret as a miracle when it's not really a miracle.
Got it. Cool. So that's a good point I wanted our students to grab hold of as well. So just based on that, because Jazib, let's bring his question in. Would you refute Zakir Naik on scientific miracles? And that also would somewhat include Brother Ahmed Didat as well.
So personally speaking, this is now my personal opinion, because I know that a lot of people have a lot of respect for Zakir Naik. I personally think his science and Islam stuff is one of the worst stuff out there. It's appalling. It's really poor, right? I never take him seriously in this regard. I find that he has a very poor understanding of philosophy of science. He has a very poor understanding of science, and this is quite shocking to me, seeing that he's a medical doctor. So, for example, on multiple occasions over a period of 20 years, when people ask him about evolution, he says, "Isn't it just a theory?" When that's not what theory means in science. Theory in science means it's a very well established paradigm, right? So I find his scientific stuff to be very appalling, very appalling. So I personally would not gel well on their interpretation of science. Sheikh Hamid, no, hang on,
Yes.
I can't send it to you. What I've done is on WhatsApp, Sheikh, I've sent you even my abstract. So this is a summary of what my talk is going to be about.
Yeah, sure. If you send it over, I will. I haven't received it yet. Yep, it's come across.
So for those guys, for those of you who are wondering about when I'm speaking, so there's a brochure that'll be coming out, and you can easily see it there. Wa alaikum salam, Zahra. Bye bye.
So this is an abstract for those of you viewing on Facebook and also YouTube. I'm just copying and pasting what Dr. Shoaib has sent, so you can have a read of that. Hopefully, it'll help you decide whether you want to attend that lecture as well or not.
So
okay,
Sheikh, it's sent it as 4 different posts because there's a limit to what you can copy and paste.
Yeah. So I think on YouTube it's come as 4 posts, so do kind of read through them. On Facebook, I think it's come as 1 post. So you can look at that. This is how it would look on Facebook. Right, so yeah, even here it's kind of shortened. Okay, we will start wrapping up slowly because Dr. Shoaib, but you seem very passionate still. Can I ask what caused this passion this week?
No, nothing, Sheikh. I just wanted to have a deep dive in some of these ideas.
I like that. Okay, brilliant. Okay, there is. Okay, we've done the Dr. Zakir Naik question. And just to clarify as well that Dr. Shoaib is not talking about Dr. Zakir Naik's, interreligious kind of work that he's done in terms of Islam, Christianity, Judaism. Yeah. He's not talking. He's referring to specific when he talks about science and Islam and within that realm. Okay. Okay, here's an interesting one. Let's see. Dr. Zakir Naik says watching Ertugrul is haram. I disagree with him. That's what Hussein is saying.
I can say good on you, bro. Well done. So that's your opinion. Okay.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay, Zahra Ashraf. Dr. Shoaib.
That's just my talk. That's
sorry. I didn't see that. Okay, cool. Okay, so we're coming back to Unais. Yep, Quran is not scientific book, not a history book, but Quran announces to its readers to think on his body, culture, and animals.
Yeah. Allah tells us to reflect and think.
Yep. Yeah. So So there's more about reflection as opposed to it being a science textbook.
Yeah.
Zahra's come back and said, "Is Ertugrul haram? If it is, I need an apology and I will be sad."
Again, ask Mufti Saab.
Yep. Okay. Jazib is saying, "Same here. I believe his science to be really poor as well. I have seen some people leave Islam because people took his science." Now, this is a very, very important point that has been raised here. Would you like to talk about this?
Yeah, so you mean, so Hamza sources, right? So in the English-speaking world, I would say, at least in the West, the number 1 guy on atheism is Hamza sources. I don't think anyone can deny and argue with that. He himself clearly states, right? He himself clearly states that the whole science and the Quran movement has been an absolute shamble. He himself states that Muslims have left Islam because of this. So I agree with that. I think this whole science of the Quran, this movement has to die. It has to go away. It was an issue when it came up, and it's an issue until now. So we have to get rid of this. We have to eliminate this off the charts.
Absolutely. And if anyone wants to watch the talk by Dr. Shoaib on scientific miracles in the Quran, just Google it on, or just in the search engine of YouTube, and you can have the exact talk as well by Dr. Shoaib on that topic. Philosopher. Dr. Zakir Naik's study on Hinduism and Christianity is good. Yep, as we mentioned, we don't think Dr. Shoaib is talking about that or denying that. But again, I think sometimes when you do go into myself, I've studied Abrahamic faiths, and I sometimes feel that when we do have these debates, we do sometimes interpret their texts on what we feel. And our hermeneutical approach can be wrong, because sometimes we have our Muslim theology or Islamic theology in the back of our mind, and we begin to read the Hindu Vedas, or or the Hindu texts, and we can get it wrong there as well. So a lot of sacred texts, it does come down to interpretation. So sometimes I think it can be unfair, similar to Hindus approaching the Quran and reading it from a Hindu worldview, and that would be, I think, incorrect as well. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Shoaib.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Now we have ulama-e-din who are asking us a question. What is your views on irreducible complexity as an argument against Darwinian evolution?
I think irreducible complexity is weak because...
So maybe you would like to expand on what irreducible complexity is, Sheikh.
So irreducible complexity is simply this idea. It's a position where there are certain features in our biology, in us, that are so complex that you cannot reduce them to their components, right? That's why it's irreducible and it's complex. Okay. So in that regard, I believe that ID is really a poor argument in this regard, because scientifically it is plausible that we may come up with an explanation where those individual parts could have had an evolutionary history, and them at one point could have combined together to form the irreducible complex entity. So I personally believe it's a very weak argument. And as I've mentioned before, because I think ulama-e-din came late to the show, but I believe that regardless of if the universe is designed or not, it does not undermine God's existence. So that's why I don't really care about the ID movement. I can accept evolution on its own terms without an issue, no problem.
Okay, and there's an interesting notion that's come up here from Jazib. Dr. Shoaib has had some good coffee.
So unfortunately,
yeah.
Go ahead,
Go for it, Sheikh. I was just going to tell everyone that you're not a coffee man. Yeah.
Hate coffee. I hate coffee. I am a chai guy. Karak chai all the way.
Okay, so I hope we've clarified some myths about Dr. Shoaib there and what he drinks. Dr. Zakir Naik debated William Campbell on scientific miracles, and Dr. Naik completely destroyed Dr. William. And in 2015, Dr. William won the Nobel Prize in medicine. What's your take on that? That's an interesting point.
Right. Okay. So I'm not sure about. So I'm not sure exactly which part was debated. Like scientific miracles exactly. I'm not really sure. But if you won the Nobel Prize, that's good to know. I'm happy to have that information in my head now.
Well, I think what philosophers trying to say here, Sheikh, is that Dr. Zakir Naik destroyed Dr. William Campbell, and Dr. William Campbell is someone who's won the Nobel Prize in medicine.
But destroyed him on what, Sheikh? That's the question.
Yes, that's the question. So, philosopher, if you could get back on that, that'd be great. We now have Dr. Avicenna Aristo asking a question. Evolution is part of every living thing.
Yes, I can agree. Yeah, what a statement. Yeah,
okay.
Muslims have no issue.
Okay, the philosopher MMA, he's back. Or she's back. We don't really know the Dr. Philosopher or the philosopher MMA. Have Dr. Shoaib studied any Eastern philosophers? Interesting. And how would you critique Eastern religions such as Hinduism and Buddhism from a philosophical and Islamic perspective?
So this is not my territory. I want to make sure I'm clear. So my focus is on Islam and science and atheism. My specialization is not on Eastern philosophies. But I can definitely tell you that Hinduism, if you follow the contingency argument, polytheism stands no chance. So that's why Hinduism is cancelled. How would you criticize Buddhism? I don't know. I do not know. I'm not
within Buddhism, they don't even believe in a god, isn't it? That's the way.
It's a cyclical process until you reach nirvana. Yes, but how would you refute that? Don't know. I haven't even studied it with enough charity to be able to understand what I'm criticizing, right? So what I will be criticizing is a straw man, and I don't want to criticize a straw man.
Yeah. Jazib, exactly. It has to go. I think he's referring back to the scientific miracles in the Quran. Yep. Islam only indicates signs, but people have taken it so literally that people straw man science in favor of their view of Islam instead of thinking objectively and correctly.
Yeah,
absolutely. Also, just wanted to say, coming back to, I think someone mentioned up here as well, about the lesson that was being taught to some students this week in Pakistan and which happened to go viral. I think that's what Jazib is referring to here as well, where when that Islamic studies teacher said, "Oh, Islam doesn't believe that the earth moves and that it's
Mhm.
static," right? And when they claim that Islam says that, it's not really Islam saying that, because you won't find that in the texts, right? You may find quite the opposite. But sometimes when you take the opinion of one particular scholar and claim that is the opinion of Islam, I think that does a disservice to all Muslims in
Yeah,
so many different ways. So that's
yeah,
something that needs to be clarified, that sometimes when you have opinions of particular scholars, they are not the opinions of all the scholars out there. And
agreed.
especially if they are not scientists or well versed in science. Okay, they may
Mhm.
have some good understanding about science, but not so well versed in science to make such a claim. But anyway,
Yeah.
let's move on. Ulama
Sheikh,
Deen are
my
back.
battery
Yeah.
is going to die in 15 minutes.
50, okay, so we've got, just say we've got 10 minutes. Let's wrap this up in the next 5-10 minutes, inshallah. Evolution cannot explain altruism perfectly, and our cognitive abilities being reliable also. So what are your views on this? And again, we'll use a buzzer. Could you explain this question for our students?
Yeah, so the idea here is that evolution is a naturalistic theory. I think that's where the brother's coming from, or the sister's coming from, and therefore we even have to explain our mental content, our soul, our morality. All of that has to be explained naturalistically, i.e., through nature, with no intervention from God. So I believe that altruism, again, it depends on which theological school you hold, right? So in Ashari theology, good and bad don't exist. There's no such thing as objective good and bad, right? So if according to that worldview, altruism, whether it exists or not, is irrelevant in that paradigm. The Maturidi school or the Athari school, these are other theological schools, they may have their own responses. But whether we can address our cognitive abilities, I think all three schools will have an issue, because we believe that fundamentally what makes us human is the soul. It's an immaterial reality, which is inaccessible to science. We can only explain the body and the development of the body, and that's it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Unais is back saying, what is your reply to those who write and speak as Quran includes scientific
So Sheikh, I got
facts?
my charger. So we're back on.
Oh wow, interesting. Jazakallah Shaykh. What is your
Yeah.
reply to those who write and speak as though Quran includes scientific facts, as their brother showed you a book talks on it? Yeah, so just say this person, Dr. Mazhar Qazi writes this. What would you respond in terms of scientific miracles in the Quran? That's what Unais is asking, I think.
Um,
And like I mentioned, for the full answer, do Google Dr. Shoaib scientific miracles, and there's a whole
yeah.
hour talk on this topic
Yeah. So
with Q&A as well.
as I mentioned, I personally believe that there are no such thing as scientific miracles in the Quran. They do not exist, right? So my response to this is, show me what your proof is, and I'll show you why that's wrong. Simple as that.
Cool. Right, we have Fadil Azri saying, Assalamu alaikum, brother. I also do not agree with some scholars, and I believe every scholar makes mistakes, but please make a general criticism. Okay.
Don't know what exactly am I supposed to do here.
Yep. Okay, so yeah,
Walaikum salam, first
Fadil,
of all.
yes, Walaikum salam, yeah. So maybe if you can, maybe elaborate on that a bit more. The next question is, Dr. William winning the Nobel Prize is enough to show how Dr. Zakir Naik gets sciences completely wrong. That's a statement from Jazib there. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. The topic of the debate was the Quran and the Bible in the light of science.
So okay, in that case, I think that he may have shown that Bible has some problems with the science. Okay, but how does that in any shape or form have anything to do with Islam and science? I don't think that we can make the case, because remember, this whole science and the Quran business, we believe in miracles. Miracles are
Yep.
not scientifically appropriate. So to say that there's scientific miracles in the Quran is completely contradictory to what you're trying to convey.
Absolutely. Mashallah, we have Ustada Noor Skaf back with us, who's saying that René Guénon, I hope I pronounced that right, wrote several books on Islam and Buddhism. Ustad Noor, if you can just clarify whether they were written in French, and if they're in English, we'd appreciate if you could maybe put some Amazon links on the comment section. That way, if anyone wants to know about Islam and Buddhism, they can do so. There are some books out there on Islam and Buddhism, but some of the writers might be seen as controversial, so I won't bring them up in that case.
Right.
For the philosopher MMA, it was Ahmed Raza Khan Barelvi who believed Earth was stationary and wrote a whole book on it. But the worst thing is Barelvi Muslims actually believe that Earth is stationary.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. So what do we do with this statement, Sheikh?
So I think this is a matter of trying to now integrate, Islamic studies with wider studies, because otherwise you end up making claims that are problematic, and this is problematic in the sense that it's completely contradictory, and there's nothing in the text that forces us to believe that we have to believe in a stationary universe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right, let's go on to Brother Jazib Kaleem. Jazakallah khair for all your answers, Sheikh Hamid and Dr. Shoaib. This was a very refreshing talk, especially with Dr. Shoaib having his chai.
Just to be clear, this was pani. It was water.
Oh, it's water, okay. And could you maybe tell us about Bridges and what that is about with Dr. Sulaiman Fadl?
Yeah, so Bridges is a company by a really, really sweet guy. His name is Sulaiman Fadl. He has this organization called Bridges Foundation. He gave me this cup. And basically, he is one of the most effective people trying to allay the concerns of Muslims, be it atheism, science. He's amazing. He's really good. He does stuff in Arabic, does stuff in English. He's a worldwide phenomenon. And I'm very lucky to say that I have the privilege of knowing him in person. A sweet brother, man. MashaAllah, sweet guy, very sweet guy.
And he's also recently done a Quran translation as well, which if anyone's interested in, you can find online.
He was working on a Quran translation. I'm mostly saying, we have hundreds of those. Why do we need that another translation? Well, the reason why we need that translation is because he's the first person I know of who has translated all the different qira'at, the different kinds of recitations. So we have 10 or at least 7 different recitations, right? With a slightly different way of pronouncing them, but the words have a slightly different meaning. He's the first person that I know of who was translated into English with all 7 of those in place. So it's a very unique and novel contribution.
And inshallah, maybe we can try and bring him on in our next session on
inshallah,
Tuesday,
I think
just to see.
Will be more than happy to come. Yeah, I think he'll be happy to come.
That'd be interesting. He's good fun as well. He's a very exciting person as well. Very passionate as well.
Very passionate.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to Talal. Just would like to say I have waited since 2006 for Islamic discussions on evolution. It has been very interesting and enlightening listening to Dr. Shoaib. Prior to this, most discussions were poor. So well done, Dr. Shoaib, for that. That's mashallah, is brilliant. Let's move on to what I mean by evidence is scientists' words is enough. You as evidence, doctor.
Rafida, did you ask something else? Because it seems like this is a new question.
Yeah. So Rafida, is this Rafida's first question? Or did she ask something? Yeah. So if you can maybe elaborate or explain a bit more on what your question is, and then inshallah Dr. Shoaib can respond. The philosopher MMA is back with another question. Can a Muslim be a pragmatist?
So for those of you who don't know, pragmatism is a form of philosophy. Now, whether this is to address this question, I need to kind of read firmly before I can answer. At the moment, I do not know enough to be able to answer this question with the sincerity that I want to give it.
Perfect. And that's good. And I like that, Dr. Shoaib, that if we need to read something more rather than just giving any answer, I think our responses have to be deeply rooted within proper sources of education and knowledge. The philosopher MMA, is homology a valid assumption?
Yeah, why not?
So we all know what that means.
Homology is a field of study where if we have the same kind of similarities that we find in a range of animals, it means that they once shared a common ancestor through which that trait came out of. So for example, our bone structure, what I mean by that is the placement of our bones in our hands, map perfectly with the fin of a whale, the wing of a bat, and the paw of a cat, which shows that we may have had a common ancestor, but probably that was several years down the line from us because they have morphed into several directions since then. That's one example.
Right, Jazakallah. And also, actually, which I forgot, was could you, for our students, explain pragmatist and what it means in this context?
Very simply put, pragmatism simply means that if it works, let it work. So it's not really strictly truth-oriented. It means that as long as something is working towards the goal that you want it to work, pragmatism is a go.
Yep. Jazib is back. I thought I was the only person with views against sciences of Dr. Zakir. I almost left Islam 7 years ago, but now I'm satisfied to be a Muslim after my own deep research. These talks need to happen. I completely agree with Jazib here. And we mentioned this many times, and we mention it to our students as well, that every single one of us is on a journey, a very deep kind of journey now. And like Dr. Shoaib mentioned before, that in the time of Sahaba, they had different types of challenges. Right? The Sahaba had different types of challenges. They had a lot of struggles. They went through sacrifices of their own kind in early Islam, which if we were there, maybe we would not be able to go through them, right? But they went through those struggles. We, however, have a different kind of challenge, and more so when it comes to ideology, especially in the West and in universities. The ideological battleground is great for us. And you mentioned that you almost left Islam 7 years ago. This, I think, is the case with many Muslims who are studying out there, many Muslims who have confusion and doubts. And that's why, and that is exactly why we want to have these open discussions for everyone to put whatever's in their mind on the plate. But remember, these discussions are still not enough. Everyone goes on their own journey, but these discussions are there to help out, to facilitate on that journey. It's like you're going on the journey in the middle of the desert and there's no water, and someone gives you a bottle of water to carry on that journey. So remember, this is not the beginning and the end. This is merely a facilitation of that journey, inshallah. And everyone will go through it in their own particular way. They'll have their own questions. They'll have their own struggles. So Jazakallah for sharing that personal detail, Jazib. That was great. Jazib Kalim is mentioning philosopher MMA. I don't like Sabur Ahmed's views. Oh, so, let me go up again. Let me go back up. Yeah. So, sorry, because the questions keep on going up. So, philosopher MMA saying, do you think Sabur Ahmed from Aira, his take on evolution is valid? So you might want to summarize that first for our students, and then give your opinion on that.
So one of the biggest dawah organizations in the world right now, in the English Muslim world, is Aira, and it's headed by people like Hamza Sources, Sabur Ahmed. Right now, Sabur has gone through many changes in his perceptions of evolution. Some that he's recorded even online for you guys to see. I know him in person, and I'm very thankful that I know him in person. Alhamdulillah. Again, very sincere guy, really, really good guy. I mean, mashallah, I learned a lot from him. And after speaking to him in person, I think that he is perfectly on the right track. I don't think there's anything wrong about him. After speaking to him personally, I feel that all he's trying to do is he's just trying to show that the public perception of evolution, in that it's basically a problem-free narrative, is wrong. I think he's very adamant in trying to showcase that there are multiple problems within the science, but that doesn't necessarily mind evolution. It just necessarily undermines that it's this ossified theory that cannot be questioned. So he's, I think, doing a good job in battling that in that regard. I think he's doing good.
Yeah, and then we come up to Jazib's philosophy of MMA. I don't like Sabur Ahmed's views. And can I just mention that, just like Dr. Shoaib said, that sometimes, when you 10 years ago you're on your journey and you're researching and you're talking about evolution, he may have said something earlier which maybe he himself now has backtracked on, and maybe Jazib, you've probably heard that speech back then. So Dr. Shoaib, if you want to maybe enlighten us on that when it comes to brother Sabur.
Right. So, for example, I think he did a take back on intelligent design. So I think he first advocated for them, now he doesn't, or vice versa. So that was one recent video that he did. So that's just one instance of several things that he kind of evolved with. Because remember, in the beginning, you have a certain understanding, and as he learned more and more, which is a sign of a healthy academic, is that they change their opinions. They understand now where they have to be careful. And he, mashallah, has developed so much, like I said, I know him in person, and I believe that, mashallah, Sabur is on the right track.
And I remember brother Sabur came to our Imam Ghazali lecture and the natural sciences at FEP. Do you remember that, Dr. Shoaib?
Yeah.
That's the first time we met Brother Sabur. It's a very nice brother, mashallah. Right, let's move on to the next question. Why do you think atheists usually don't criticize Eastern religions?
Because at least atheism that we know, they mostly arise from the West. And what's their most immediate proximity? Christianity, Islam, Judaism.
Yep. Right, Rufayda is back. Maurice Bokkal is a scientist and he wrote books in scientific facts and Quran. As an authentic person in science, his arguments have a strong stage to be an evidence. Question mark.
Okay, so does authority bring credibility? So, of course, if a scientist something, it's as if he's speaking, golden words, right? But bear in mind that just because a scientist has spoken something does not mean that it's 100%, proof. There may be some mistakes in that individual, but be careful. We cannot shoot experts just because we disagree with them. If we do that, we have to disagree even with the doctors when we are sick, right? So we have to be careful in being consistent. We may disagree with people based on counter evidences, but if we're disagreeing with them based on just because we have we disagree with the worldview that they're presenting, that's an entirely kind of disagreement based on evidence.
Jazakallah. And also, Maurice Bokkal is one of the earliest persons to actually talk about scientific miracles in the Quran as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's the book that he wrote on it as well, and he brings in the Pharaoh of Musa alayhi salam. Okay, let's move on. Jazib is saying, I would donate to Ayra Dawah any day. They're doing a great job. Absolutely. I think I would agree with that as well, that they're not just working on certain things. They're doing quite a lot in so many different areas as well. And may Allah reward them. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase their efforts and take them further as well. Hussein is asking, is the session going to end now?
Inshallah soon.
Inshallah very soon. Wa alaikum assalam, Mustafa Tahir, Jazakallah for joining us. And back to the philosopher MMA. Is it compulsory to follow a particular fiqh in Islam? Because I am a Hanafi, but after I read Bukhari, many things contradicted with my fiqh.
Fiqh is, first of all, I think it's helpful to follow a madhab. It's very, very easy. It makes your life easy. And my worry is not with the first question. My worry is with the second question. Ulama say very clearly, you cannot study hadith in isolation. Each hadith has multiple strands, several layers of difficulties, and historical context. Unless you are a muhaddith of the age, I recommend never, ever relying on hadith for your fiqh. Ever. God knows best.
And can I just add to that as well, Sheikh? If you look at it from a historical perspective as well, you can't just go up to any book and just take out passages. And especially when it comes to hadith, it's not, even with Sahih al-Bukhari, it's not in some form of chronological order as well, where you can see like a film being played out. It's not like that. It's bits and pieces and the gems of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam scattered all over in different, different themes. So with any book out there, historically, you cannot go and just read it and just try and apply it or understand what's going on, because you never know, something may have occurred after that particular hadith that you are reading, which apparently contradicts your fiqh. Something may have happened afterwards which you have not yet come across, or which is maybe not in Bukhari but maybe in Muslim or in any other book of hadith, and is a sahih hadith, which then abrogates the previous one that you've read. So we can't just, like Prophet said, we can't have an atomistic reading of hadith. So just out of context, you've got to put down, it's like a piece of a puzzle, right? You can't just take one piece and look at that piece and try and rebuild the entire puzzle. You need everything around it. And that's what I think fiqh does quite well, that it brings down the context behind it. It lays down some basic principles from each different school of thought. And that's why it is better to, and especially when it comes to ibadat, to stick to a particular school of thought, because there's no difference in that sense. But one thing I'd like to add, Dr. Shoaib, is when I was doing my master's, I was looking very closely at a few things, and one of them was the Mamluk period. And that's one of my favorite periods because it was quite exciting to study as well. And one of the things that happened, which I just want to share with our audience, is when the Mamluks started off, and this is coming back to history, Sheikh, you're smiling.
Yeah.
Okay, so when the Mamluks went out to battle against the ferocious army of the Mongolians, and they met in Ain Jalut, And following that, the Mamluk Empire was born. When they came back to, when the army comes back to Egypt, or Cairo more specifically, they now have to eliminate all of their political opponents. And they've done that now, following the war. But the only real power that now stands in their way is the Shafi'i Qadi, because the Shafi'i school of thought is the predominant school of thought in Cairo and the whole of Egypt. So what the Mamluk Amir does, what he says is, okay, to reduce that power, he now sends out a ruling saying that in every town and every village, all 4 schools of thought have to have their own courtrooms. So then what that does is, when you follow that in history, so if there's a woman during the Mamluk period, she has some really old parents, and she doesn't want to move out of Cairo because she wants to, stay as close as possible to her parents. She wants to get written down in her marriage contract that one of the conditions of my marriage is that I do not move out of Cairo. Now, she's born as a Hanafi. She follows the Hanafi school of thought in terms of ibadah. She goes to the Hanafi court room, goes to the Qadi and says, look, can I put this down in my marriage contract that I do not want to move out of Cairo with my husband? Now, what would happen in the Mamluk courtroom is the Hanafi Qadi would say, actually, I cannot do this because I'm bound by the Hanafi principles and the opinions. However, if you want that to take place, go to the other school of thought court cases and get your situation solved there. There were many economical and societal fatwas that were taking place where they were taking from the other schools of thought. However, if you look closely, when it came to ibadat, when it came to worship, that wasn't really the case. When it came to worship, they were pretty much Hanafi, Shafi, Hanbali, Maliki. But when it came to society, economics, they were taking from the others. I'm just talking in terms of the historical background, but I just wanted to add that on because I love
even
the
in the
Mamluk
Ottoman period, Sheikh, in the millet system.
Yeah, absolutely,
really
absolutely.
Yeah,
yep, absolutely. And just to big up the Mamluks a bit more, many of our followers think that it was Salahuddin who took out the Crusaders from Jerusalem. Yes, he did that, but who did completely stop them in their tracks were the Mamluks. They were the greatest fighting force on top of horses, on horseback. And they had the best horseback archery, Sheikh. No one could mess with them. And the interesting thing is that, however, they didn't have a really good naval force. So the way they compensated for that was they went to all the seaside castles, which were, being occupied by the Crusaders. They got them out and they leveled them to the ground. The reason why they did that was when the next navy force comes from the Crusaders, they can no longer occupy a castle. They will have to come on ground. And when it came to ground, then there was no match for the Mamluks. And that kind of was the end of the Crusaders. So that's my 2 pence for the Mamluks, Sheikh.
Excellent, Sheikh. That was very insightful.
Yeah. And Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, was also under the Mamluks.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I think we'll start wrapping up, but let's just see if there's any last few questions, and we are going to wrap up in the next 5 minutes. Is that okay, Sheikh?
Yep.
Because we don't want Hussein. Hussein is actually saying, I never want this session to end. Okay, so test data is saying, Assalamu alaikum, not on topic, but are there any good explanations on the complexity of free will and predestination? Is that too much of a topic to kind of talk about now, Sheikh?
Yeah, I mean, if you give me till next lesson, I can hopefully even prepare some books on this topic.
Yes, that'd be great. So test data, inshallah, next week, 5 o'clock. If you be here, Dr. Shoaib will give us a list of bibliography to look back on. Masood, no. I would say fiqh is stronger than hadith, especially when you study the Hanafi fiqh and Maliki fiqh. It just makes sense. And I think every science has its own purpose. And that's how we've got to see hadith and fiqh. I mean, I don't know if we can compare the two. It's like comparing apples and oranges. Dr. Shib, you like that example, isn't it?
Yeah.
They both have their own vitamins. They both have their own, reasons to benefit us in their own ways. The philosopher MMA, can you tell me what you have understood by the term wahdatul wujud? Because I think it solves the problem of dualism and non-dualism.
So for me, wahdatul wujud means that there's a spectrum of existence where on the one end of the existence of one end of the spectrum is God, right? So there's this ongoing existential continuum. That's what I've understood by that. Of course, it removes the problem of dualism and non-dualism, but then it creates other problems, and that is of what makes God distinct from creation.
Okay. Wahdajul says that only God exists and everything other than God, like his creation, is an illusion.
No, that's not what I've heard Wahd al-Wujud says. What I know is Wahd al-Wujud is meaning there's this continuity of existence. That is different to Wajib al-Wujud, but Wahd al-Wujud does not mean that everything is an illusion. That's not what I've heard.
Right. Okay. Okay, we are going to be okay. So can we just finish on the last three questions, if that's okay, inshallah? Let's go on to, and I think what the philosophers MMA is saying, I think that's maybe one of the misconceptions about Wahdatul Wujud.
Yeah.
Okay, Jazib, I had a talk with an atheist student of neuroscience who gave an example of there being a switch of consciousness in the brain. Atheists can use that to deny the ruh given by God. What's your take?
So regardless of whether they can do that or not, the arguments for the soul are mostly probabilistic and philosophical in nature, right? So because we can come up with all sorts of useful analogies. It's like if we are still providing electricity to a computer that's turned off, if the computer is not working, it doesn't necessarily mean there's no electricity jumping in, right? So the same way, just because somebody is able to turn off part of the brain or switch the brain doesn't actually mean there's no soul. Then there are other arguments to prove, that suggest that there are some things that naturalism cannot accommodate for. So, for example, we have content in our mind, right? So I can think of right now of an elephant, but when you unpack my brain, you're not going to see an elephant in there. Somehow they have to explain how these neurons, these atoms, give rise to this picture of an elephant in my head, and that is known as the hard problem of consciousness, right? So, and I don't think that can ever be crossed through a scientific means.
Okay, and just the last few questions. I came to know about Dr. Shoaib from Sabur Ahmed's live stream. I am very much thankful to him that I got to know about you, and I'm learning so many things from you. Yes, absolutely. And this is what it's all about. The discussion, it needs to be had, with everyone. And it's great that we're learning from each other as well. And that's what learning is all about. Athar Waqar, how you see rise of atheism in the Muslim world? Can we link present-day atheism with colonial history and secularization theories?
Yes, I think so. I think there are multiple reasons and multiple causes for why atheism is on the rise. Each country has its own specific settings and dynamics. But I particularly see that atheism is going to rise. I think more than atheism, though, at the moment, particularly amongst the youth, it's not atheism that's the main problem. Atheism is sometimes seen fashionable. Like some kids are, I'm an atheist. That's a cool thing. At least that's what I hear from my students. But mostly I feel secularism is the door for atheism, at least in the territories that I'm in.
And do you think, Dr. Shoaib, we need to discuss secularism and theories like this as well?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, and I think we'll take our last question now, and we'll leave more for next week. Ulama Deen. But there are many complex organs, i.e., just consider DNA or ribosome. So how can natural selection make it, i.e., gradually? And in the future, all evolutionists can do is make speculations. Could you explain that first, Dr. Shoaib, and give your answer? That will be the last question as well.
So this is coming back to the whole irreducible complexity, that we have specific things that are so complex that they cannot just come out of chance, right? So now the thing is that this assumes that, evolution doesn't say they just came up boom like that. They're saying this process happened over millions of years. And within that time span, it is conceivable for those things to have worked together, right? We know that Allah has put certain things inside natural constituents. When you put sodium and chlorine, it makes sodium chloride, right? So similarly, when these things have their course of history as they go through time, it is not scientifically inconceivable to come up with an evolutionary pathway where these things could have come about. Is it a highly improbable? Yes, but it's still scientifically plausible, right? Just because it's highly improbable does not mean it is impossible, right? So, and like I said, I don't see why there's an issue here. Why do we need to rely on design when having no design does not deny God? And I think this is the reason. My personal experience with Muslims who are behind the design argument, they feel that if there is no design, there is no God. If you understand the argument from contingency, then regardless if the universe is designed or not, makes no impact to God's existence, makes zero impact. So I don't know why we feel the need to stress on design. It's a complete waste of time, in my personal opinion. Complete waste of time.
Jazakallah, Sheikh. We have some who are asking for any recommendations of a reading list that you can give. Maybe that could be something that you could factor in for next session. Talal is saying, do you have a book recommendation list? If you ask Dr. Shoaib, then it's an endless book recommendation, isn't it, Sheikh?
Yeah.
So I think next week, if Dr. Shoaib could do that for us, last I think point here from philosophers, I would recommend you to watch Dr. Israr on Wahdatul Wujud. I think Dr. Shoaib kind of misunderstood it, but anyways, it's not an Islamic belief. Even Dr. Israr said it is purely a philosophical discussion.
Sure, I'll be more than happy to review anything. Sure.
Yeah. So if you can maybe send it over, I'll be happy to watch that as well, inshallah. And Jazakallah. And I think we'll end our topic here. Dr. Shoaib, on behalf of myself, my students, the parents of our madrasa, and also all of our viewers and those who have been coming on, on our sessions, Jazakallah for your comments, for your questions, for making this very interactive. Jazakallah, Dr. Shoaib, for spending your time, especially today, where you've given us 2 hours, 25 minutes, and 39 seconds so far. Jazakallah for that, Sheikh. Jazakallah for your time. And I think as our viewers have highlighted, that these discussions are very important, these open discussions. So people who do have questions, maybe their local imams or their local mosque teachers may not be well versed, or this might not be their field of interest. They might be better qualified in other aspects of Islam, maybe not in things like evolution, and they may not be qualified to answer your questions. So therefore, these topics by scholars who and scientists who have looked very carefully at this and analyzed this really well, it's good to have these discussions. Jazakallah, Dr. Shoaib, this is fantastic. Oh, and Ustad Tayyiba Hamid is saying that Jazakallah khair, Ustad Hamid and Dr. Shoaib, for your time.
Thank you so much, Sister Tayyiba. Inshallah, I look forward to coming to London again. I really miss your food. So
Jazakallah, Sheikh. Ulama Deen, actually, sir, I am not making an argument for God, but against Darwinianism. That's
all right. Okay. So Ulama Deen, yeah. So I understand your. Sure. Can you share that? So I understand you're not making an argument against God. I know that. But what I'm saying is that if you believe in Darwinism, it does not entail God does not exist. That's what I'm trying to say. You can be a Muslim and a Darwinist. That's what I'm trying to say. That if you can still accept Darwinism, you can still accept the Darwinian theory of evolution and how it came about. That does not undermine Islam. That's the point. I hope that makes sense.
Fantastic. Jazakallah khair. Dr. Shoaib, tips to read really fast?
No, I'll share this for the next one. I thought about it. I don't
Absolutely.
know. I'll share it for the next one.
Fantastic. No problem. Okay, Jazakallahu khair, Sheikh. And there's no words that I can actually use to fulfill thanking you for what you have done in this whole regard and this topic, and helping our students and everyone else. Jazakallahu khairan. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
Assalamu alaikum.